Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
We're turning all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church on Dark Matter Radio.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Yeah. All right. How you doing? Tweeting. That's what I'm doing. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Wednesday, November 19th. We are 320 days into the new year, live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California for KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your oh-so-humble host, Jimmy Church. How you doing? Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us. Defending that Constitution, freedom of speech, this show, me, you, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States, hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, north and south, up and down, far and near. Our good friends to the north, Canada, Europe. Ireland is big time, taking over the UK, I'm telling you. It's a revolution over there. Australia, New Zealand. I wonder if we got anybody from China tonight. Hong Kong or otherwise. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Let's get this show cracking. Podcast updated. I think we got all the bugs worked out over there. We're trying to get it, faster, better, quicker, meaner, leaner. It's there. It's excellent. Got a bunch of email this morning. Man, I missed the show last night. What do I do? I missed the replay. What do I do? The podcast. That's what you do. I missed it. I missed Reverend Michael Carter. What do I do? The podcast. That's what you do. $2. Faders.org. Rockin'. Faders.org. If you're a fade or not, if you can hear me right now, if you're listening to this show, faders.org is where you want to go hang out. JimmyChurchRadio.com. Okay, all right. What's on the show? Okay, cool. Sneak pictures once in a while and break some news. Okay, yeah. JimmyChurchRadio.com is cool. It's a bookmark. We got a new website coming out though, and we're about I think I said yesterday we're about a week away from that. But if we can get the new website to look as good as faders.org, because that's the benchmark now. If we can have two sites like that, oh, man. Yeah. Today, let's get the show cracking. Let's go. Oh, man, I hate it. See, I immediately, right after that, I got to go and retweet and talk. Well goes, I can tell when you're goofing around in there because you can't talk and goof around at the same time. Today, Twitter CEO and friend of the show. That's right. Jack Dorsey, 38 years young. Changed the world by 38. Changed the world by Oh, hold on here. This is 2014, 2010, 2009. 5 years, so he's 33, I think, when I met him. 33. Changed the world by 33. What did you do today? What did you do? Oh, man. Think about that. Cool guy, though. Sports guy. Cool guy. Jack. I tweeted him today and said, dude, we're going to give you a shout out on the show today. I was hoping for a retweet. Didn't get it. I didn't get it. I don't think. I'm sure I would have known. Also today, drummer Matt Sorum, 54 years old. No, I'm not going to tell a Matt Sorum story. I'd get arrested. Our dead guy's birthday today. Check this out. A bit strange, but this is true. MC Ryder just said, Jimmy, can you walk and chew gum? Nope, can't do it. Can't do it. I either have to stop walking to chew or I walk and don't chew. It's true. When I was playing guitar, when I was, one of those long-haired guys on the Sunset Strip, the microphone in front of me was never turned on. Couldn't sing and play guitar at the same time. Couldn't do it. Could do one or the other. Could I do both? Our dead guy's birthday today. Check this out. I know this is going to sound strange. And I texted Jack today just to see if he'd respond, Jack Dorsey, because our dead guy's birthday today is big band leader Tommy Dorsey. Born in 1905, died in 1956 at the age of 51. On November 26, 1956, he was in his Greenwich, Connecticut home, and he began taking sleeping pills, from which he, check this out, he was so sedated that he died in his sleep from choking after eating a heavy meal. Dude, not the way to go. His brother, Jimmy Dorsey, who was also excellent, led Tommy's band until his own death from lung cancer the following year. Wow. Any relation to Jack Dorsey? What are the odds? What are the odds? Today on Twitter, here we go. My grandfather played, what's this from Jonas? My grandfather played accordion for Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey. Anytime you hear accordion, that's my grandpa. Right on. Everybody play. Anybody, look, your grandfather obviously could play the accordion. He was the real deal. Because Tommy's band was a who's who of musicians. Gene Krupa. How good are you when you have Gene Krupa as your drummer? It's like, yeah, we need a rhythm guitar player. Let's get Hendrix in here. That was Tommy Dorsey's band. So, Jonas, if your grandfather played accordion, he slayed at the accordion. I respect that. To get in Tommy's band, with all these youngsters that listen to the show, like myself, I just happen to be a music fan and love Tommy Dorsey growing up. But it's not like when I bought his albums when they were released because he died before I was born. But Tommy Dorsey, that was a band. Gene Krupa, loved his speed. See, Keith McDonald, these are people that know what's going on. Gene Krupa, one of the first guys arrested in the United States for marijuana. That's right. And then Tommy hired him after that. It's a good story. Where are we? Oh, Twitter. Okay, you ready? I'm going to light this up right now. I'm going to check the intelligence of the Fadernauts right now. And you might want to go and follow us on Twitter, @JChurchRadio, #DMRadioNet, and answer this question. Plankton, flora or fauna? Plankton, flora or fauna? Follow us on Twitter right now, @JChurchRadio, Facebook, YouTube, everything's Fade to Black, JChurch Radio, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, Black to Fade. Do it. Follow, like, subscribe. Tonight, we have Dennis Stone of America's Stonehenge with us at the bottom of the hour. Going to open up the phone lines, do all of that stuff. We're going to have a good time tonight. Dennis Stone, America's Stonehenge. Okay, let's see here. Fauna. Mark Dunbar is a genius. Fauna. Brian Anderson. Fauna. Donna Colvin. Flora. Justin says fauna. Jonas says fauna for sure. Walter says flora. Okay. Jeremy Maddock comes in strong with whale food. Fauna for sure. Okay, so plankton is fauna. All right. Well, everybody should go talk to Mark Dunbar because he's a pretty smart guy and go read his tweet. Plankton, flora or fauna? Jonas trying to come in and cover his bases. Do you want the right answer? I'll have it for you coming up. We'll get to that. Open lines tonight, 323-825-5045. We'll do that. We'll do that in the last segment. How's that? We'll do that at 9 p.m. Pacific. We'll open up the phone lines for Dennis. It's going to be good. Tomorrow night, don't forget, Fader Night, right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I like being the nighttime guy. I would love to be a nighttime FM guy. Those guys were the coolest. You know, just playing that cool rock and you know, that was Steely Dan. Would love to be that guy. Man, what a gig. You know, just roll it. You know, I have like 3 or 4 songs in a row, go out back, burn a heater, come back in. You know, you got people hanging out. You're wearing the cool shirt. You're probably driving the cool car. You know, that would be the gig. The late night FM guy. Late night FM guy. Twitter today. Richard over in the UK posted one of the most disturbing videos I've seen in a long time. A video purported to be from a astronomer in Hawaii, and that he couldn't sneak these files out because they would know it's him. So he shot a video with his iPhone of the monitor of what astronomers have discovered and are tracking this huge thing next to Saturn. It is bigger. Let me think. It's probably 3 times the size of Saturn. They noticed a disturbance in the background and the blackness of space. Enhanced the photograph, and there it is. Boom. It looks like, I would say it looks like something swirled and sideways, like if you cut the tube in half and it's swirled. Kind of looks like that. I don't know how to explain it. Swirling. And he mentioned black hole. Donna Colvin says, next to Saturn, that was a star. Oh, no, don't go there, Donna. Don't go there. It's crazy. It's crazy. If Richard pops up in a Twitter tonight, or if somebody else, who has the link, Nancy just tweeted in. The link is up. It went all over our Twitter feed today, so go and look up Richard and check it out. It's pretty disturbing. I don't know what it is. It could be just one of those things. I don't know, but it freaked everybody out today. And Richard's comment, and before I clicked on it, his comment was, man, a bunker's not going to help us out in this situation. And I thought, what's he talking about? I immediately jumped on the news and started to think that maybe something was going on over in the UK. I don't know. And then I watched this video. And I got to say, if you are, and this ain't no Marshall Masters action. This is something totally crazy. This is something totally different. And I if it's look, I'm speechless. I don't know what to say about it. You have to go and see the video. So everybody just, somebody just get that posted up. It was on Secure Team. What's that? Secure Team 10, whatever that website's called. Those guys are cool. They're kids, but it's good stuff going on over there. That's where I saw it. Pretty amazing, pretty crazy. And so let's, let's get the show cracking. Let's get to our first break. Let's get that done. Let's get it out of the way. Got a bunch of email, got a bunch of breaking news. So let's get to all of that. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Tonight, Dennis Stone, America's Stonehenge, will be with us at the bottom of the hour. I want to know about this place. Pretty crazy. Got a bunch of pictures we're going to get posted, too. It's pretty trippy. Dennis Stone at the bottom of the hour. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. Do not touch that mouse. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, you have tuned into the latest phenomenon in late night talk radio, Fade to Black, starring the inimitable Jimmy Church, showcasing his continuing quest in pursuit of knowledge of the strange and paranormal. Sit back, open your mind, and let's get cracking.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I gotta tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444, or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Oh, yeah. So today, this is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, bespoke radio for the masses. Today, over on Facebook, we posted this mermaid. Go check it out. Just go over to Facebook. It's making the rounds now. And been debunked, I think, sort of already. It might be a prop that was made for Pirates of the Caribbean. But that doesn't take away from the pictures because they are good. Oh, man. You go check that out, and it's just, oh, wow, really? Oh, man, whoa. Close-ups of her face and the body and how it's done, and it's just, wow. And look, it's a mermaid, what you going to do? But I looked at everybody here, and I was like, you know what? Go ahead, post that. It's pretty cool. And even if it's not real, it's probably not, but even if it's not, the pictures are great. I mean, they're really good. And so Steve just said, "Hey, did Jimmy mention the mermaid that he posted today?" So go look. It's go to the fan page. It's jimmychurchradio.com on Facebook, and check out the pics. Pretty interesting stuff. Just awesome. All right, let's get to some email really quick. I need some sound effects. Email. You've got mail. Need one of those. You've got mail. You've got mail. Email from Norick. He said, I had the freakiest dreams after last night's show with Reverend Michael Carter. He says, the interview was amazing. It really hit home for me. When you asked the Reverend if the visitors ever sat on him, and he answered that sometimes they would sit on his back. Yep. Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. That's in the email, by the way. I won't go into any of the details, but I will say that Reverend Carter's description of the experiencer's change in perspective and change in paradigms was spot on. It's also very refreshing and necessary to hear this message from a religious authority. That's from Norick. Email from Renee, also about Michael Carter. She says, Michael Carter's personal story touched me on every imaginable level. Physical, psychic, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, cosmic, even humor. Tonight's show touched me in a way, she wrote this last night. Tonight's show touched me in such a way no nuts and bolts tale, however fascinating, ever could. Since you are so good at drawing them out, I hope you will have as many experiencers as possible on in the future. Thank you, Renee. This email from Kiki, if it is indeed silica, it could still have come from the crash, Roswell, talking about the debris that we posted up on the website at jimmychurchradio.com. You can go look at the pictures. It's still there. Supposedly, we didn't have that technology of silicon back in 1947, right? So, if it's from the crash, we jump forward with transistors and computer chips, well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's from Kiki. And I'm reading this email because, wow, I didn't really look at it like that. You know, look back to Corso's book with Bill Burns and all of that disclosure that happened there. It just kind of made me scratch my head and go, hey, that's interesting. What if? What if? Interesting. I had that moment that I had the other night when Jason Martell was on the show, when Jason goes, yeah, but the Ark of the Covenant in the box in the King's Chamber, and what do you got? We all had that moment, didn't we? Jason, nice. Nice move, bruh. Nice move. That's what Kiki's email did to me today. Thought that was pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. Everybody just came, it's the, okay, all right. Yeah, okay, I'm listening. I'm reading. I get it. Then it just makes you stop. Makes you stop and go, Keep those guest requests coming. You know what's happening tonight. It's because of you. Last night, because of you. Tomorrow night, Fader night. Those guests are because of you. Let's get to some news. What happened to Ebola? Well, you know, the headlines today on CNN, same thing. Ferguson, the cold chill, Obama, ISIS, all the normal stuff. What happened to Ebola? Got an email from Renee. Here's your update on Ebola. So I went and checked it out, and it was so disturbing, although it was true, but I just couldn't read it on the air. This is a family show, and I'm not going there. What the what the Ebola, the latest Ebola update is about. But apparently, okay, I'm going to paraphrase and dance around this a little bit. This is a family show, but we all know that it can only be transferred through body fluids. Well, apparently they've got some guy in a 90-day quarantine in India because it's showing up in that other body fluid, the male kind. Yeah. I just had to stop. I was like, no, I can't do this on the air. Can't do it. Just can't do it. Guest Michael Anderson says, bring on Rob Halford talking about backmasking. Listen, Michael, I would do that. And I've talked to Rob at length about that subject. But what he went through in that trial was so traumatic that you know what? He's a friend. I respect him. I'm not gonna take him through that again. It was all BS and completely behind him. But there was death that was involved and accusations flying back and forth, and he had nothing to do with it. And so no, I'm not going to do that. But I do appreciate that. But when I sat and talked to Rob about that, just watching, he has a hard time talking about it, let alone coming on to a show like this. So cool guy. I'll have Rob on to talk about other stuff, but that, no, I can't go there. Can't do it. You want me to tell you what he said? We'll talk off the air. All right. Mankind's first ever probe of a comet found traces of an organic molecules, and a surface much harder than imagined, scientists said yesterday of the initial sample data taken from Philae. That's right, Philae. Philae fell asleep on the comet, 67P, on Saturday, having run out of battery power after 48 hours. I still question the brainiac behind that one. Yet the team said Philae's Cossack gas analyzer managed to sniff the atmosphere and detect the first organic molecules out there shortly after landing. Pretty trippy. They managed to get that done. That must have been the first thing. Right down the checklist. Okay, we got 48 hours of battery. What are we doing first? Analysis, this is a quote from the statement. Analysis of the spectra and the identification of the molecules are continuing. So they managed to get that test done and get the data back here. Pretty interesting. 48 hours. Swimmers who dive into any number of Canadian lakes might not emerge clean and refreshed, but dripping with globs that resemble slimy fish eggs. A legacy of industrial pollution has caused great changes in Canada's water chemistry, creating a boom in tiny organisms that transform their lakes into jelly. The reasons involve my Twitter question from earlier. The reasons involve a complex dance of species. But here's the short version. I'm going to give it to you as quick and easy as I can. Acid rain caused by smelting operations and other human activity remove calcium from the soil in drainage areas around their lakes. The depleted calcium levels in many lakes, which has hurt a kind of plankton that needs the element calcium to build armor. Enter a competing plankton, which requires far less calcium to bulk up, and it's coated with a slimy, oozy gel that repels predators. Yummy. Summer at the lake just doesn't sound the same, does it? A man was arrested today at the White House after Secret Service found a rifle and ammunition in his car parked nearby. 41-year-old R.J. Kapheim of Davenport, Iowa, approached and told an officer that someone in Iowa told him to go to the White House. Kapheim approached the officer at 15th Street, just north of the East Wing, and he said that his car was located at 16th and Constitution Avenue, less than a half mile from the White House. That's right. Secret Service proceeded to the vehicle, searched it, and found a .30-30 hunting rifle with ammunition. Kapine was arrested. I love doing this show, especially this next one. Man, we dig deep. Civil rights leader Al Sharpton is yelling and screaming today, saying that he doesn't owe the IRS $4.5 million in federal tax liens. MSNBC said in a press conference today that the $4.5 million was the original figure he was ordered to pay back in 2008, but that he has been making regular payments since then, and the amount is a little less. Sharpton did not give the outstanding balance owed by him and his not-for-profit companies and his for-profit companies, Raw Talent and Rebels Communications. The Times reported that Sharpton is still liable for personal federal tax liens of more than $3 million, state tax liens of $777,657, and his for-profit companies $717,329 on state and federal taxing. Hold on, let me add this up. 3 million plus, let's round that up to 800,000. Okay, and that one, we'll round that one down to 700,000. Let me see. Hold on. I'm working on this. Oh, $4.5 million, Al. And I don't have CNN over at the house anymore at the crib. So I've been watching MSNBC, which Sharpton is on. I've been watching it for the last couple of weeks. And I'm thinking to myself when I read the breaking story about this today, how does that guy keep a straight face while he's on MSNBC, knowing he's $4.5 million large into the feds? Have you ever almost had your electricity shut off? You know, you get that third bill. You know what I'm talking about. Oh, man, I got to pay this or my stuff is shut off tomorrow. You can't think. You can't get through your day. You're at work. All you're thinking about is you can't talk to people right. You can't think. You can't order food. You can't answer phones. You can't do email. All you're thinking about is your $77 you owe the electric company. That's it. You can't think. How does Sharpton go on the air knowing he's $4.5 million large into the feds? He's an actor. And that guy is good. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Bespoke radio for the masses. Follow us on Twitter right now at JChurchRadio. Hashtag DMRadioNet. Come hang out in the sandbox. Running a little late. Let's get to it. Dennis Stone, America's Stonehenge. When we come back, stay with us. Don't touch that mouse. I'll be right back.
Are you afraid of the dark? Don't move. Don't touch that mouse. You are listening to Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses on jimmychurchradio.com.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark matter.
Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Yeah. All right, let's go. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow us on Twitter right now at JChurchRadio. You can shoot me an email to Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. You can also go over to our contact page where we use non-NSA, specially encrypted servers over there. If you want to do it in confidence, that's right. We are only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. You do want to come out and hang out right now on Twitter. I'm serious. It's an unbelievable event every single evening. What goes on in the sandbox on Twitter? If you can hear my voice right now and you're going, church, I don't know. It sounds like hype. Oh, no. Do it just once. At JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet. It's unbelievable what goes on. I have no idea how many tweets I have received tonight. I've got Dennis in the wings here. I'm going to do this really quick. No, you're not going to believe me. I have 722 tweets in the last 35 minutes. That's what goes on in the sandbox. Everybody's hanging out, conversing, questioning, wondering why I'm even on the air. They do this. So go check it out. It's pretty cool. Sling some mud. Let's do this. All right, let's get this cracking. Dennis Stone is an American airline pilot, but his lifelong passion has been his family's property, America's Stonehenge. Located in Salem, New Hampshire, Dennis has spent nearly his whole life at the Hill and being around America's ancient hidden history. Aside from his father, Robert Stone, being the owner of America's Stonehenge and the co-author of America's Stonehenge, The Mystery Hill Story, he also founded NERA, that's N-E-A-R-A, the New England Antiquities Research Association. Dennis has been to many of the stone chambers in New England, and he and his family have been to many of Europe's most prominent megalithic sites and studied their similarities with his property. Dennis and his son Kelsey appear on the inaugural season of Scott Wolter's, our friend, America Unearthed. I'd like to welcome to the program, Dennis Stone. Dennis, how are you tonight, sir?
Oh, fine. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, Dennis, I got to start here. And first, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on. I'm totally excited. And, we're just going to sit, talk, sit on my couch and have a conversation and have a great time. So, first off, are you ready for that? Are you ready?
Yeah, I've been ready all day.
You fired up? Okay. All right.
Yep.
Now, but I got to ask the obvious question. Okay. This is the underarm, slow pitch, lob across home plate. Your last name is Stone, and you live on America's Stonehenge. What gives?
Well, it either could be a heck of a coincidence or it's preordained. We're not sure which.
Do you? I mean, seriously. I mean, it's just one of those things. I know you're laughing because you hear it all the time, don't you?
Yeah, I think it was meant to be, though.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, when you're growing up in school, I suppose you could say, "Hey, well, I have Stonehenge on my property." Ha ha ha. But as you become an adult, and everybody's Dennis Stone of America's Stonehenge, they're like, "Oh, come on, really? Really? Who thought that one up?" But that's your family's name.
Yeah, they get a lot of mileage out of that one for sure. Yeah, that's our name. We haven't changed our name, and the business has been that for a long, long time.
Tell me, let's have a lot of fun with this. It is such an intriguing site. There's so much to talk about with it. But you grew up on the property, and there's mystique that has been around it, since the early 1900s when the reports, started to surface about it. But you guys lived there. Did you and your brothers and sisters and family just go hang out and play on the rocks?
We did. Yep. We really did grow up with the place. I think I was about 1 year old when my dad became aware of this site, and my sister is 2 years behind me. So we were basically pretty much almost born on this place, and we've been here our whole life through almost 6 decades now, I guess.
And did you guys ever rearrange anything?
I can't say. It was a long time ago. Actually, the rocks are pretty big, so it'd be pretty hard to move things around up there. But we did play among the rocks, though, for many, many years. We had a great time up there.
Okay, well, you just answered the question. The heavy rocks you couldn't move, but the little ones you guys were rearranging?
Yeah, we built little Stonehenges and stuff, yep.
Of course. All right, you came clean. Do you feel better?
Yeah, it's a burden off my back now.
Well, has anybody ever asked you that? Growing up, it's on the property. Has anybody ever asked when you were kids? Did you guys ask it? Because you don't know the importance of the site probably when you're 5 years old, 4 years old. Has anybody ever asked that before? Did you ever go out and rearrange those rocks?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that or skepticism, as we grew up as to, who built the site, did we build it? Did the people that we bought the property from build it? And so on and so forth. And, we got teased a lot about the site and calling us the Flintstones and so forth. But, yeah, that came up occasionally for sure, yeah.
How many acres do you guys own out there? How big is the property itself? Not Stonehenge, but I mean the entire stone property.
Yeah, the property is about 110 acres, and it actually contains all sorts of features that we became aware of through research over the years. Some of the property we thought, we just bought it to protect the hilltop, the entire hill. But as they did research during the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, we found a lot more artifacts and features up there that are man-made that are very important. So we're really glad we did, we were able to get the whole entire hilltop, back in I think the last piece of property we bought was about 40 years ago in 1972, I think it was, when property was still fairly not too expensive back then.
How many people stop by the site each year?
It's in the between 30 and 35,000 people a year.
Wow. How close is your house to the property?
Well, we live on the other side of the hill, but we actually grew up in the town next door where Alan Shepard and Robert Frost, the town was called Derry, and my dad had grown up in that town, and he'd never heard of the place until the mid-1950s. It was actually a radio talk show, just like we're doing right now. And he became aware of that, and my wife and I actually bought 2 acres of land next to this property back in the mid-'80s, and we built a house here in 1986, 87. So we're on one side of the hilltop, and then my dad got 2 acres on the north side, actually. In the late 1980s, he moved from Derry, and he lived there until he passed away about four and a half years ago.
Well, okay. So the property itself, your father didn't. Oh, okay, hold on. That's a mind-blowing statement.
Yeah,
it was right there, and you guys didn't know.
Yeah, my dad grew up in the next town and went through high school. Then he went into the Coast Guard, and when he was up in Labrador, actually, in the early 1950s, and he was right near where the Vikings had actually landed up at Lonzo Meadow in Newfoundland. And he was fascinated by history, by Columbus, by the Vikings, by Native Americans. He was really interested in all of that. And if he had only known that the Viking site was there, I guess by 1963 they proved that, but he was there 10 years too early. But he always had a really passion for this type of thing, and it wasn't until a radio talk show on one of Boston's biggest radio station, an AM station, and it was a talk show called Yankee Yarns, and it was on a Friday night. And he used to listen to it up in Labrador on the skip wave. He used to listen to that show. And when he came back, he got out of the Coast Guard, went to work for AT&T Bell Laboratories as an engineer.
Really?
And and that was his vocation. And but he always was interested in history. So this radio show was talking about this site that particular night, and it just kind of blew his mind. He never heard of it. He's only like 8 miles away. He never heard of this place. And shortly thereafter, he was at a barber shop. And while he was waiting to have his hair done, he saw a New Hampshire Profile magazine, and there's a whole article about the same site. And he asked the barber if he could keep the magazine. He goes, well, how old is that? And he goes, well, it's 1952. It's 3 years old. He goes, take it. And at a card game at my aunt and uncle's house the following weekend, he showed it to, there's a number of people there. They all got together on Saturday nights, and he showed it to the people there, including my aunt and uncle. And they said, we used to go there in the 1930s and picnic up there. And my dad goes, can you take me to it? And they said, I think we can. It's been 20 years, but the following weekend they went up there and they saw it for the first time. My dad did, and he fell in love with the place. And that was in 1955.
What did he do for Bell Laboratories?
He was an electromechanical engineer, I guess.
Which Bell Labs did he work at?
Well, he was at the one at Methuen, the Andover plant.
Andover. He was in Andover.
Yeah.
I work for Bell Laboratories too, as well. Bell Labs, Indianapolis. So
I think there's one in Murray Hill, New Jersey.
Yeah, Murray Hill's the big one. Cherry Hill, Murray Hill, Andover. When I worked for them, it was probably the same situation when your dad worked there. They had sites all over the place.
They were, yeah. And he got out around 1983 after just a little over 30 years. And I think at that time they were starting to break up the AT&T system.
That's what happened. That's when I left.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, I left in 83, and not to get off on the subject, but that's what happened during my tenure there. They split everything up. It was considered a monopoly, and that was it. All the baby Bells were born, and Bell Labs was separate. It was a crazy time because back then, also remember, there were no phone stores.
Oh, right.
And that was part of breaking up the monopoly, so people could go and buy their own phones. That was one of the, because we leased. The kids today, they don't understand that back then, up until 1983, 1984, you didn't own your own phones. You didn't. You leased them.
That's right. Yeah, they owned. Yeah, the phones in your houses weren't yours. That's right.
No,
they owned the lines and everything.
They owned everything, and you leased your phone for a couple bucks a month. And you only there was like three choices. Remember, there was like the Princess phone, then there was the phone the classic one where the receiver hung up on the top, the handset.
Oh, yeah. And those lasted forever. They never broke.
No, they still sound the best today. And that was it. You had like 3 colors and 2 phones, maybe 3. There might have been 3 phones. And that was it. And that was our phone system all the way up until the 1980s. People don't... the youngsters today, they have no idea what it was like back then. We had 3 TV channels and 3 phones.
That's right. Yeah, it's like a piece of history that's almost forgotten now, except for some of us, have to remind them and tell them about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is your father still alive?
He did die, let's see now, almost 5 years ago. I said 4.5. He died just before Christmas of 2010. And let's see, 2009 he died. I'm sorry, he never made 2010. So it was just about a week before Christmas, and he was 80 years old, and he was here, I think, at 24 years old when he became aware of this. So he spent a good part of his life here too.
When he went up there with his friends that first time, was it overgrown and covered? What was the condition of Stonehenge back then?
Yeah, it wasn't open to the public, and research had gone on since the 1930s by Mr. Goodwin and Malcolm Pearson. And Malcolm Pearson actually is the one that my dad bought the property from, and he passed away just after my dad in 2010. I think it was the spring of 2010 at the age of 99 years old. And Malcolm's name comes up a lot with these ancient ruins on TV shows, radio shows such as yours. And Malcolm's the one that showed William Goodwin this site. And they worked on it from about the mid-1930s. And William Goodwin died in 1950. He thought that the site was a Viking site when he first came up and saw the site. He was amazed by the site. He couldn't believe it, but he thought it was a Viking site. So he hired a crew. He bought the property. He put up a chain link fence around the site that's still up there. This fence is like 75 years old and still in great shape. It's a chain link fence to protect the site.
Mm-hmm.
And as they uncovered the site, he said, well, it doesn't look like a Viking site. It looks more like an Irish Caldy monk monastery. That was, and he stayed with that theory till he died in 1950. But when my dad got up there, some of the brush was on the hilltop. All the things that you can see today, like the astronomical alignments, they were way out in the woods. There was a hurricane that happened in 1938 all over the Northeast and caused a lot of devastation. So the forest was probably, less than 2 decades old by the time my dad got up there and saw the site. So it was like a young forest growing back up. And it wasn't open to the public. So it was kind of it was an okay state, but it wasn't where you could just walk around with all these trails that we have today, which makes it really easy for our visitors.
Sure.
Nothing was marked, and there was, brush and, debris and stuff like that on the site. But he had to climb under the chain link fence, and my aunt and uncle and my mom were up there with him, and my dad spent about an hour looking around, and when he came out, he had to climb back underneath the fence to get out of there. He said, this place is just amazing. And And then they said, well, what do you think you're going to do? And he goes, well, I'd love to own this someday. And my mom said something about he has rocks in his head, and I guess he did. But eventually he met Malcolm Pearson, and that's a gentleman that my dad bought the property from.
Where is it exactly for our listeners? They're going to go to Google Earth right now and probably go check it out. Where exactly is it in relation to town?
Yeah, let's see. Now, we're in Salem, New Hampshire, and we're midway between Boston, the capital of Massachusetts, and Concord, New Hampshire, which is our state capital, right on the southern New Hampshire border. And I don't have the longitude memorized in my mind. I can look it up. We have a topographical map. But North Salem, New Hampshire is actually the town we're in. So it's Salem, New Hampshire, but we're in a part of Salem called North Salem. And we're about 18 miles from the Atlantic Ocean, and again, about 40 miles north of Boston. So right up Route 93. So if they Google that, they'll see Route 93 and Route 111, and we're less than an hour drive from Boston.
I love your accent. Do me one favor before we move on. Just say chowder.
Chowder.
Say chowder.
Chowder. Chowder. That's it. Well, I don't live down in Boston. They talk differently down there.
Oh, no, they don't. They talk just like you, Dennis.
Well, we don't think so, but I have a different state.
Oh, that's funny. That is too funny. Now, how we're going to post a map, that the famous map that was drawn back in I think in 1945. So, whoa, if you could tweet that out really quick. This map is interesting. How large is the site itself? Is it a couple of acres?
The main site is approximately 1 acre. That's where the chain link fence is, and that's where most of the stone features are, the underground chambers, the sacrificial table. It's about 1 acre. And then surrounding that are about 20 acres of walls that contain the upright stones where the astronomical alignments are.
Uh-huh.
And then outside of that, there's 80 acres, and there's a lot of interesting features outside that we've discovered over the last couple decades that are part of the site, actually. So the main site's about 1 acre in the area.
Have you completely overall? I'm looking at the map now here. Let me retweet this really quick to everybody so they can check it out. Yeah, you do want to follow us on Twitter at @JChurchRadio, #DMRadioNet, so you can check out this map. And pretty extraordinary. This is as I've looked at all of the pictures and done my research on this since I first saw it on America Unearthed. I was blown away, and I had heard about it, and it was one of those things where I just kind of ignored it. But once you start to study it and you start to look at it and try not to listen to the skeptics and the debunkers and look at it, there's something going on here, and it is extraordinary. What about the surrounding 80 acres? Have you guys completely gone over that property as well?
We keep finding things, so I don't think we have. We have done a project, was a Shepard test pit study that was done in the 1990s by the president of the New Hampshire Archaeological Society. It took several years to do it, and they went out and they dug these, and they mapped it, and they located, all these positions. They took a shovel, actually, and they went out and they did a 50-centimeter diameter hole, and they hit bedrock, what they call a pre-occupational level, and they discovered a number of fire pits. They found stone material that came from just north of Boston, over 30 miles from here, so it was imported. It looks like it was a workshop for making stone tools. They found a number of quarry sites out there. These big stone slabs, some of them weigh, one of the bigger roofs we have on the main site is 14 tons.
Whoa.
Pretty heavy, yeah, about 28 to 30,000 pounds. And what they appeared to have been doing is they had a big project in mind for the site, and they were still working on building the site. And all over the hilltop, over those 80 acres, we just discovered a few more of these. My son was up there doing some clearing on the astronomical alignments, and he discovered about another dozen of these big slabs. They were actually removed from the bedrock. They were propped up with a stone, and just like the one we have we have a video, and I'm in a video presentation when people come here. We have one of them that we talk about how it was raised. It was propped up, and it was actually being shaped using a technique called percussion flaking. It was stone against stone, And so they were dressing or shaping the stone with stone hammers, and then they were going to use the stone for something, but they never did. So it looks like work in progress. And then when we found more of these 2 years ago, we wondered, wow, this is a much bigger scale than we thought. They had a bigger project in mind, but they walked away from it. So, why did they do that, And what grand scale, plan did they have for this place? So we have dozens of these stones all over those 80 acres that are just laying out there, propped up. And, these people had a bigger plan for the site, and then they abandoned the whole thing. So it became kind of a big mystery to us just in the last few years.
Well, one of the things that I find interesting was that, some of the claims was, the original landowner probably built this himself. And I discount that immediately because of the age back, and I'm guessing here, but, 1890, 1880, 1870, or whenever that property was occupied by him. That I'm looking at what I think is the sacrificial stone, the one with the square that's the rectangle that's carved into the top.
Yes.
How big is that stone, and how heavy is it?
Yeah, it's a very large stone. It sits on 4 stone legs, and it's about 9 feet long and about 6 feet wide approximately. And the groove is approximately 4 by 5, but it doesn't go to our units of measure, and that's another interesting thing that we found up there, the units of measure for the site. But it weighs about 4.5 tons, so 9,000 pounds, and it does set up on the 4 legs. And when Mr. Goodwin and Mr. Pearson saw it, and Mr. Pearson was a professional photographer, fortunately, so he photographed everything. They thought it was resting on the ground. They didn't realize that the stone legs were there initially. They thought that things just lay on the ground, and that they began the whole project over that acre site of cleaning and digging and doing some restoration of some of the walls. They found that the table actually sits on 4 legs.
It does, and I'm looking at it here now. In the 1700s, in the 1800s, I'm not saying that man wasn't smart. We didn't have a way to move this stuff around, but local farmers moving 8, 9, 10, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14 ton stones around into a configuration like this just doesn't make any sense to me. It serves no practical purpose, and why would they do this? It looks to me to be ancient.
Yeah, they weren't. They were very practical. Like I said, they wouldn't be building something for nothing. Every minute counted, for their survival. They did make large stone foundations for for barns, sheds, carriage houses, town halls, meeting places. But they didn't. When you do see these type of stone foundations, you'll see the drill marks in the stone, in the stones themselves. Modern tools that were used to actually cut these stones. Our stones have no indication of that whatsoever. And we had a doctor of, actually he's a master stonemason, a doctor of theology and historical anthropology. And he came to our site in 1978 and began researching and studying the way the stones were quarried. And he's published, he's written about, this over and talked on different group meetings. And he's still doing a little bit on the site, but he's done some other New England sites too, and he goes to Europe quite a bit. But he said the stones were actually shaped, again, using hammer stones. So it's a Stone Age technology versus a Middle Age technology. So it's kind of fundamental. So whoever quarried these stones did it during probably the Stone Age, not the Middle Age, So it was a long time ago.
Yeah, what year are we talking?
Well, the site, our best information that we have, the data suggests that the site's about 4,000 years old, 2000 BC. And that's from radiocarbon-14 dating. We've done about 16 of them since 1966 on the site. And the oldest one on the main site was done in 1971. We found next to a chamber called the Chamber in Ruins, the North Wall. In 1969, actually in 67, they began to excavate the North Wall. And they found a piece of root growing through the wall. And back in Goodwin's time, the stump was still there. But 1967, the stump was pretty much rotted, and they were looking to see if they could find a piece of root or part of the stump there. And they found a piece of root. They sent it to Geochrome Laboratories in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and they radiocarbon dated the root to 1690. So that puts it back before the Patty family and before the area was settled.
Right.
And what it showed was that the wall was built, and then a tree grew through it. So the wall preceded the tree or root. So first thing was the wall was built, and then the tree came later. 1969, they went further down in that same. I think it was 1 yard by. It was either 1 yard by 1 yard. Now they use meter squares, but back then they used feet and yards.
Right.
And they went down further and they found charcoal, actually like a horizon of charcoal from some sort of fire. And they dated that layer of charcoal to 3,000 years old. And in 1971, they went down further and found a 4,000-year-old layer of charcoal. Below that, the bedrock had been lifted off. Then the wall was built, and then this sediment, and then fires took place, and all that was all undisturbed. You could see the stratigraphic layers, and in those layers they found stone tools such as a hammer stone scraper. They found rubbing stones in that mix, which is kind of interesting. But the first thing that had to happen is the bedrock was removed, the wall was built, and then later these fires took place, and then the tree grew right through the wall. So we dated it to 4,000 years old, and that was in 1971.
How many chambers total at the main site?
There's about a dozen stone structures, and most of these you can walk into. The chamber in ruins, however, the roof fell into the structure, and that's going to be a project we're looking at. We're looking at it this fall, but it's too cold now. They're going to get in, and they're going to try to remove that stone, excavate the chamber, and maybe do restoration on it. But that structure has a lot of interesting features, including 2 stone tablets were found inside of it in 1964 that had writing on them.
And what did they say? I was going to ask you about that, but you beat me to it.
Yeah, no, I don't mean to steal your thunder.
That's okay. That's okay. It's your show. I'm just here. I'm just the guy on the mic.
Oh, yeah. Well, that is an interesting chamber, and it is located right in the center of all the structures. And the roof slab on that weighs somewhere around 6 or 7 tons.
I'm looking at the map. So which chamber are we referring to?
Let's see. It should be the chamber in ruins, and I think it's. I'm trying to think. Does it have a numbering system on the one you're looking at?
I see half circle chamber, the unnamed chamber, east-west chamber, collapsed chamber, sunken ceremonial units.
Could be this. It could be the collapsed chamber, perhaps. Yeah, because we have a tour guide map we give to our visitors, and every structure has like a number, and then with a paragraph that explains it. I'm not sure if the map that you have has that on it.
Okay,
sounds like a different map.
Okay, so what did the tablets say?
Yeah, there were 2 different stone tablets, and they were found in 1964. An attempt was made in 64 to raise that stone out of there, and the stone lintel. There were 2 big slabs. One was a lintel stone, and one was the large roof slab. They didn't have the equipment. They didn't really have the time or money, but they really wanted to get it out of there, so they were doing some cleaning in there. And what they found was these 2 stones, and as they looked at them, they had some sort of markings on them. We had them on display in our museum from 64 to 1975, so about 11 years. Dr. Barry Fell from Harvard University visited us that year, and then he spent the next, he died in 1994, so he spent almost the next 2 decades not only looking at our site, but other sites in the all around the world, actually, all over the New World particularly. But he said that there were, one was Phoenician, and the other one was Libyan. The Libyan one was broken, and he didn't give really an interpretation of that, but he said it was Libyan writing. The Phoenician writing said that structure was a sun temple dedicated to Baal on behalf of the Canaanites. And because the Canaanites were the Phoenicians were called the Phoenicians by the Greeks, but in history they're Canaanites. But,
right.
Yeah, so there was a sun temple supposedly.
Where's that? Where are those tablets today?
Yeah, we have them in our museum on display, and Dr. Barry Fell. We found others. We found Celtic Ogham, but he found inscriptions from Maine, Little Manana Island, off of Monhegan Island in Maine that were Phoenician, all the way down through New England and then through into Brazil, actually. Phoenician writing way down in Brazil.
Well, the Phoenicians were traders, over the oceans. That's what they did. And that's interesting. I can't remember that part of America unearthed. Did Scott see those tablets?
Yes, he did. Yeah, in fact, he had one shipped out to Minneapolis to his office, to his business, and they looked at it with the microscopes and everything, and then they brought it back here. So he was familiar with that, and he did look at that particular stone, and that was a big interest to him. I think they want to do more study on it, and he has technology that could kind of give a rough date on things, tell you whether something's fairly new or something could be very, very ancient, I guess, where there's different scanning electron microscopes, 3D microscopes, and all of that. So that technology seems interesting. Maybe that will help to solve some of that. It may rule out that they're besides the script itself, that it's something that was made recently and it's a hoax, that kind of thing.
Right. What did Harvard have to say about that once he wrote the paper and said that that's what that said?
Well,
I mean, that's going out on a limb. Are they still standing by that?
Yeah, Barry Fell, he raised a lot of controversy, a lot of criticism because he was rocking the boat. We were basically taught that Columbus was the first explorer to the New World. Because we know that the Vikings were here 500 years before that, but they kind of downplay that a little bit. We feel that people were coming over the oceans, both the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, to the New World much, much earlier, going back thousands of years before Columbus. It's not completely proven yet. We don't have conclusive evidence, but there's a lot of, pieces of the puzzle that suggest that. Barry Fell not only looked at inscriptions on stones, but he also looked at place names in the Northeast, such as mountains, rivers, valleys, and gorges, all over New England and the Northeast. And he said names like Mount Monadnock in New Hampshire, Lake Memphremagog in Vermont, Amoskeag River in New Hampshire, Merrimack River in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. They're not only Algonquin with a certain meaning, because Native Americans would name something and it had a meaning behind it. He found it was the same in Gaelic. The same words with the same meanings on both sides of the ocean, but he found list upon list of these words, which also was like a piece of evidence.
With the carbon-14 dating, and I have a list here of all of the tests that were done. I don't know how to read it. So I'm looking at it in descending order. The top one is 6530 plus or minus 40 BP. And then the one with the smallest number, well, you've got 75 plus or minus 160. And the last test is 140 BP. Explain the numbering on this to me, like I'm 2 years old, just...
Yeah. Let's see, the oldest date we have on the hilltop was when we were doing some of those shovel test pits, they discovered a fire pit near this North Stone. The North Stone is one of the monoliths that aligned with Polaris today. It's an astronomically aligned stone. 4,000 years ago, it was aligned with a different star, but we'll get to that. But right near there, they were doing some shovel test pits, and they found another charcoal fire pit. And they sent that charcoal to Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And I think it was around 1995 they did that. And the date came out approximately, I think it was 7,300 years old, plus or minus. And what it shows us is there were human activity going on top of the hill. And that period of time is called the Middle Archaic time period.
Right.
When they're Native Americans. The time period before it's called Paleo, but this is the Middle Archaic. And we didn't know anybody was here at that time, That's pretty early in time. So somebody was on the hilltop doing something, building fires. He might have been camping up there. And this is probably over 3,000 years before we believe the main site was built. So there's been human activities. One of the questions we have is, who was even here 4,000 years ago? Were there people here? Yeah, there were people here. And in New Hampshire, up near the White Mountains in New Hampshire, they found paleo. And going back between 10 and 12,000 years ago, right after the glaciers melted, people were surviving up in our White Mountains in New Hampshire, which is pretty amazing, So on our hill, we know people were here 7,500 years ago. And then I mentioned the route that was 1690,
right,
and the two other 3,000 and 4,000-year-old date. And then we had one carbon dating that was near the Patty household. Well, the Patty family came to this, actually bought the property in 1734. They were shoemakers, and there were 5 generations of shoemakers. And it was a third one that actually, his name was Seth. He was a third generation over here. There was Peter, Richard, and then Seth bought the property. Seth Sr., we call him. And sometime after he bought the property, we think he could have put a house up here. They say not before 1750, not after 1801. So we know the house was built probably sometime after 1750. And because they had fires and everything. And what we have is underground drains. This whole site has a whole network of underground drains, man-made. It was part of the original site. And we got some charcoal from a sump pit. I think it was around 1968. And it was composite. It was actually old charcoal. It had been contaminated with charcoal, probably from the Patty family building their fires.
Right.
So I came out with kind of a contaminated dating. But we've taken 16 different datings on the site, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones we have, but there's 16 of them anyway. I talked about them more, important ones, I guess. But
so they went and they saw the stones and they used it for a foundation for their house. They actually built a house right on the site.
Yeah, it's interesting. We don't know exactly how this site looked when they came when he bought the property in 1734. Boy, it would be wonderful to have some sort of a, if somebody was an artist in the family and had made a diagram of it or something.
Right.
Something attracted them to it, but there's an area called the compound, and it's where the Patty house was. So we feel that they took advantage of a courtyard and they built a house over it. And the courtyards consist of very large stones. But the Patty family modified it appears. They put a stone wall right in the middle to support the house. Today we'd use lolly columns, a metal post with a concrete, those round ones you put in your cellar to hold up the house,
Sure.
They didn't do that. They used a stone wall. And so they took advantage of that. They used the walls for a foundation, and they were shoemakers. And it was a third generation that lived there named Jonathan. So there was Seth, and then there was a Seth Jr., and then Jonathan. We talk a lot about Jonathan because he was an abolitionist. He was involved with the Underground Railroad.
Mm-hmm.
He was a tax collector, but his vocation was making shoes, just like all his forebears, 5 generations of them. But Patty also had quarrymen up there. It was either Patty, Jonathan, and we think his son also had a lot of the site destroyed. They actually had stones taken away by quarrymen, and they were using the stones for local bridges and local projects in this area. And we estimate that perhaps half of the site's missing today. So rather than building the site, they're actually having the site torn apart, which is really a shame.
Yeah, when I look at the site and you think about, settlers and acquiring property back then, I would have, used those rocks to build walls and fences and maybe a fireplace. We're lucky, it all wasn't taken down. Stones are rare. Where were these quarried, by the way, the big stones? How far were they transported to get to the site?
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of them came from the hilltop. And so like the Sacrificial table actually came from where the astronomical center of the site is today. I don't know if the map you have up shows that. We didn't know that until Mr. Goodwin in the 1930s actually found 2 stone piles we call cairns, and there were 2 cairns right over where the quarry site from where the table was extracted from by the original builders. And then they moved it about 40 feet and set it up on the legs. So that's just for one instance of how they moved some of these big stones. There's a 14-ton slab, and that structure is interesting. It's right by the Sacrificial table. It's actually the only 2-story structure on the site that's remaining today. It's a 2-story structure, and the floor of the top, the roof actually, the bottom structure, and the floor of the upper structure, if you will, is 14 tons. And they moved that about 10 or 15 feet. So they didn't move that one too far. And it weighs about 30,000 pounds. But they actually moved it, and then they raised it up, and then they built the structure. But around the 80 acres, they have stones that are up to almost 1,000 feet from the main site. And so I think they were moving stones from quite a distance also, not just just from where those structures are, but they actually moved them quite a distance in some cases.
I missed our little tag at the top of the hour. This is Fade to Black, Bespoke Radio for the Masses. I am your host, Jimmy Church. We are talking with Dennis Stone of America's Stonehenge. Follow us on Twitter right now, at JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet. If you would like to email me any questions for Mr. Stone, Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. You can do that. Get that through. Make it good, and let my producers think it's worthy of reading on the air, and they'll send it in here to me. Also on Twitter, you can hashtag F2BQ. That's F and the number 2, BQ. Those are questions straight into me in Twitter, and I will get those. And with that, let me... I've seen a couple of skulls. Has anything, any human remains, any skeletons, anything like that been unearthed?
We have a few pieces of bone that have been found on the site. There is a couple of satellite structures outside that 1 acre, outside the chain link fence, like the watch house. And the watch house is actually large glacial boulder with a structure built. If you're looking at it, looking into it from the outside, the boulder's on the right and the structure's on the left. And there are about 50 of those type of structures in New England, actually. So it's not just our site, but there's others that somebody was building this, and they have other ones throughout New England, may have been the same builders. But inside of that chamber in the 1958, I think it was, they were doing an excavation, and they found two pendants, I think. One was a little piece of slate, triangular shaped, with a hole drilled through it, and the other one was a piece of bone and had a hole drilled through it also. And then, we wondered whether it was something that somebody was wearing and dropped there, or whether that was a burial site. But the bones in New England usually, it's very acidic soil up here, so they usually dissolve in a few hundred years and maybe up to 1,000 years. And after that, it just turns right back to dirt because the soil's so acidic and the conditions up here don't really, not conducive to the preserving bones. But in that same chamber, we had another piece of bone that was larger, and they sent it to a museum in the late 50s. And they said it might be a piece of bison bone, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, that was kind of neat. But on the main site, Mr. Goodwin did such a nice job of cleaning that he removed all the dirt and soil from these chambers. They did sift it, but then they just left it in piles. They didn't have the technology back then. Today they would send the samples out and have it analyzed for chemicals, I believe. And if there's certain trace elements in these, this dirt, it might indicate a human burial. But they didn't have that technology, and he wasn't aware of that, so they just were looking for artifacts. So they cleaned these chambers out and basically destroyed some of the evidence by doing that.
Well, who built... now that we've had so much time to look at this and so much analysis, I have two or three questions. Let's get to one. How are you getting funding? Are there any universities involved? And two, who built it, and what are the archaeologists saying now?
Well, those are great questions. It is self-supported. It is private property, but 1970, the state of New Hampshire designated it as a state historic site. So we have a marker on Route 111, which is down the street. I'm sorry, on Route 28, right near the Walmart. But there is no state funding or federal funding for this. So we have a gift shop, and we have admissions to go through the site. And that's the way we've been doing it since 1958. And now it's in the third generation of my family. So it is self-supported, yeah, unlike some of the other sites are. But we're doing okay with that. The other question was...
any universities involved? Is there any active investigating in archaeology going on right now? No, NERA has been doing most of the research over the years. They were formed in 1964, and I know you mentioned them at the beginning of the program. My dad founded that 50 years ago. In fact, they just had a big celebration recently. And there have been other groups involved with this site. Before NERA, there was the Early Sites Foundation, which Malcolm Pearson was a member of that, and a couple of Dartmouth professors, actually. I'm going to mispronounce his name. He was a great Arctic explorer, Valdemar Stephenson, I think his name was. Okay,
it's not quite pronounced like that. But
yes.
There's an Arctic Center still up at Dartmouth College that he actually started. It's still there. He died in 1963, I think, and Hugh Morrison from Dartmouth College, because we had Barry Fell from Harvard University, Stephen Williams. We had Dr. Carter from Texas A&M. We've had a lot of, and more recently we had Dr. Louis Winkler from Penn State. He was an archaeoastronomer since 1964 up to, I think he retired around 2000. Unfortunately, he passed away suddenly, I think around just a little over 10 years ago. And he was starting to do quite a bit of research on our alignment stones, and he found a couple of star alignments. And so we don't have a university tied to us directly, but we have had a lot of different individuals from university working on the site.
What about Robert Schock? He's right there. Has he been by?
He is right there, and I just saw him on TV the other night. I don't know if he's ever visited this site. You think that would be something, it's only 40 miles up the road. If he has, I'm not aware of it. And I saw him, and I thought the same thing. I said, I wonder if he's been up here, because I'm on the road a lot with the airline. I'm on the road about 80 or 90 hours a week, so I miss a lot of people. And a lot of people don't introduce themselves. They'll come in. Some do. Some just come in here. I think Leonard Nimoy was here. He did do a show on us back in the 70s called In Search Of.
Right.
We were number 4. We were on the 4th show of the 100-and-something shows he did. Rod Serling did us in 1970, but some of these people just either come and they don't say anything, or they just don't.
H.P. Lovecraft was there.
Yeah, he was here, I think, in the 1930s, yes, yep.
And Bill Shatner, William Shatner, Captain Kirk.
Captain Kirk, we had Spock and Kirk, yep.
Yeah, see, you know, I do my research. I check into
you
this.
Certainly do. Yeah, and a lot of people aren't aware of that. Yeah, so that was one of the more recent shows, too, with William Shatner, and I think the show's still on the air.
So, and the third question was, who built it? What do we, who are we talking about now?
That's the $1 million question.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, there were a lot of theories. The evidence seems to suggest we do know Native Americans were here on this hilltop. There's no doubt. One of the shovel test pits in mid '90s, when they were running those shovel test pits in the parking lot, we found the wigwam site, and the wigwam was about 30 feet across. We found all the little stains where the post once stood. It's a very large wigwam. Inside that circle, we found two fire pits. One dated 1,700 years old, and one dated to about 2,000 years old. And we actually found some grease still in the soil. It didn't break down. It wasn't biodegradable. It wasn't. It just stayed there. So that's something else that can be carbon dated, which we didn't do. We did the two fire pits. Across the other side of the parking lot, we found a cooking rack. So we have a Native American village in our parking lot going back around the time of Christ. On the other side of the hill, on the west side, overlooking the Spigot River, which is a tributary of the Merrimack River, which is a very large river in New England, we found pottery out there in the 1950s, and it was stylistically dated. They didn't do the thermoluminescence testing. It wasn't available back then.
Right.
But the style of it was Middle Woodland period pottery, around 2,000 to 2,500 years old. So we think that shelter was a summer shelter, and they get the northwesterly winds coming in from Canada. And by winter, they moved to the other side of the hill where the hill kind of shelters them, and they built these wigwams, and so they went back and forth seasonally. So we knew Native Americans were here. We had the 7,500-year-old fire pit, and so they were here on the top of the hill going back that early. But the evidence, like the style of the structures, the inscriptions, seem to indicate European. Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but structures such as the east-west chamber look a lot like the gallery graves you find in Holland. They have a funny Dutch name I can't pronounce. They're in northwest Ireland, and I saw them in Carnac, France. We saw the same type of structure. They always run about 20 to 60 feet in length, and out of true north, they run east and west, always east and west true, not magnetic. And our site, that structure runs east and west true, and it runs about, I think the length of our site's about 30 feet. Next to that is a V-hut, and the V-hut looks very similar to what I saw in Ireland called the wedge tombs. And the wedge tombs always face southwest, and our structure is the only one on the hilltop that doesn't run north, south, east, and west. All the structures have a true north, south, east, west with their walls, the way they're aligned.
Right.
But this one faces southwest towards the winter solstice. And so the size, shape, and orientation of these structures are very, very similar to what you find on the other side of the ocean. And there are about 50,000 megalithic sites in Western Europe, and there's a very strong resemblance to not only sites, Western European sites, to our site, but other sites in the Northeast, in New England. There's about 800 of them in the Northeast. People think we're the only site. Some people also think Stonehenge is the only megalithic site. There are just actually hundreds of thousands of megalithic sites in the world, actually.
It also reminds me, have you talked to James Swagger about this?
Yes, I have. I was on his show, I think, earlier this year, I believe.
Because this looks exactly like, what's all over Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
At 100%. I thought that the first time that I saw it, I went, wow, that looks Irish.
And that's what Mr. Goodwin thought, too, although he thought the site was about 1,000 years old. They didn't have the radiocarbon dating in the 30 like we do, but that's what I thought, too. It has, and there's some Scottish sites that also look quite like this.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, no question. But what did James say?
Well, I think kind of talking like what you and I, the same kind of conversation we were having, and he thought it was very interesting, the similarities, the size, shape, and orientation of the structures, the inscriptions, place names. And I think he felt that people were traveling the oceans using them as highways, not as barriers, And, a lot of people, I wouldn't know about this myself, but these megalithic sites, not only in Europe, but they continue into Russia, the Black Sea, they go into China, into India, and there are about 120,000 in Korea. Today, about 80,000 of those remain due to development. And they're in Colombia, South America. So, almost all the continents, 5 of the continents out of 7 have these megalithic type sites.
What's the attraction You know, we're talking now, you've mentioned Vikings, Phoenicians, the Indians, and different cultures. Not only that, but let's talk about the settlements that were there. Look at Jonathan Patty and his family. What's the attraction to Mystery Hill to everybody? It seems like everybody wanted to stop and hang out here. What's the attraction?
That's another good question. It is located near the Spigot River because Native Americans and others would use those as highways, in their canoes. We think that the people that built the site found this hilltop very attractive because the hill, although it's quite high, it's 360 feet above sea level, there are hills surrounding us. So we're almost like in the middle of a bowl, and the rim of the bowl is about a half a degree up. And that would be all the hills around us. And it's like the back of a snake. These hills go up and down, and they have peaks and valleys. And what we found from the astronomical alignments is they actually use those what we call horizon features, those dips and notches in the hills.
Sure.
4, 5, 6 miles away, to align with the sun, moon, and in some cases the stars. And they did this in European sites. There's one site called Kentra, I think, in Scotland. It did the same thing. They used a far distant notch, and they aligned that with the whatever it was, sun or whatever, moon or whatever was rising over it, and you have your foresight and your backside, and then you use that notch, and it makes for a very, very accurate alignment. And they did the same thing here and actually shaped some of these stones on our site. Some of the some of the monoliths, some of the standing stones were actually shaped to fit into the notches of these far distant horizon features.
One of the, we're going to start to get into the astronomy side of this because that's one of the most fascinating aspects. Your son, Kelsey, by the way, that's a smart kid. You did good there, young man.
That's my wife, I think. That's what she says anyway.
He's on top of his game. He's on top of his game. When I had that moment, seriously, I was like, come on. No, come on. When he did the alignment of the structure and banged it all the way across the Atlantic and speared it right through the heart of Stonehenge, for all of us, that was pretty dramatic. That was pretty heavy, and he did some really good work on that. Tell the listeners how he came about that, and did it really line up? I mean, did it really line up to Stonehenge?
That's that moment when he showed me that. I know that hairs on my back stood up, and it was like we've been involved with the astronomical alignment since 1960s. It was when Stonehenge decoded by Charles Hopkins. Did I get the right name? Yeah, he's from Boston, I think, Boston College, I think. Actually, from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, and he wrote that book, Stonehenge Decoded, in 1963. And by 65, CBS did a special, and they showed Stonehenge. And Mr. Goodwin even knew in the 1930s that we had stones out in the woods there that were standing, but he didn't have time to pay attention to them. And, he didn't have the means, the knowledge, or anything like that to really explore them at that time. He was too busy with the main site. So we knew the stones were out there, and we started thinking, could any of these be aligned with the sun, moon, or stars? And that was in the mid-60s. By 1967, we began clearing out the trees. Part of that shovel STP, or shovel test pit study we did that took years, one of the things we found out, and the lady that did it, her husband was a doctor of geology at Tufts University, so we had a good source there, was that the hilltop was 75% bare bedrock 4,000 years ago. It wasn't forested like it is today. And so when they put up the alignments, they could see the sunrise and set. They didn't have the trees in the way. So we had a problem, though. We had to start clearing out these trees to actually watch the sunrise and set. It's really forested up there. It's really thick. So we began clearing out avenues. And the first one we did was a winter solstice sunset stone that we know today, but back then we weren't sure what it was. So we cleared it out to the horizon. And in 1970, we were actually up there for the first time ever. My dad, myself, the manager of the time, and a neighbor of mine, we all went up there, and they had a home-built snowmobile because we had to get up. He broke the trail with a home-built snowmobile he built out of wood, believe it or not. The guy was really a very smart guy. He's over in Japan. He's a nuclear physicist now, but he was our manager back in 69 and 70 and 71. Well, we all went up there and we watched it, and we might have been the first people in thousands of years to actually watch for the first time the sun setting over that monolith, and it was a winter solstice of 1970. It was pretty cool. But what my son was doing was he was looking to see if there are other sites beyond where our alignments are, and people kind of looked at that in the 1970s even and said, gee, we have other sites in New England. Maybe there's some ley lines. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that, how sites align with one another,
Sure.
Yeah,
we're gonna get to that. We're gonna talk about ley lines in a second. We're not letting that part go. Trust me.
Okay. Yeah. People looked at that in the 70s. They didn't have Google Earth and computers and all that back then. So it was actually going out on your feet and taking maps and compasses and going out. It was very difficult back then to go out there and see if any of these things are aligned with, say, the winter solstice or spring and fall equinox or any other alignment up on our site. But my son decided to try it, and he started, doing a little research and using Google Earth and going out on some of the alignments. And there are some sites that are aligned in New England to some of these, some of the quarter days, the seasons, in other words, summer, spring, fall, and winter,
sure.
And cross-quarter days, which are days in between. We'll talk about them too. But my son decided to keep going with the one that went to the northeast, and he kept going with it, 3,200 miles, and it went across England. And then he brought up the scale. He brought it up, and it was. And as he did it, he's realizing, because he's been to Stonehenge a few times, it's in the Salisbury Plain, and he kept blowing it up till you could see actually Stonehenge. And as we looked at it, it went right through Stonehenge, And he found that out, and I think it was on a trip with the airline when he found it. So when I came home, my wife goes, you got to check this out. And I couldn't believe it. So I said, how accurate is that, And so he did it over and over again, because if you're off just a little bit, it can be Stonehenge completely.
Yeah, you end up in the water somewhere.
In the water, yeah. And other people have done it too. And as far as we can tell, it goes right through the large trilithon at Stonehenge, which is it's amazing. And I wish my dad had seen that, And then the question is, well, is that one heck of a coincidence? It's just really unbelievable.
No, that's not a coincidence.
Or is it beyond coincidence?
Yes.
Is it something else? And if it's something else, how could they have done that? How could they possibly have done that? So right now the research is going on. We need, he was in college when he was doing that. He has an engineering degree and a business degree, and so he's going to get back to it and do a little bit more research. And others can do that too. We really welcome other people doing that. What he did find, though, if you go south of here, and they knew this in the 70s, was an effigy mound. It looks like a turtle, and it's built out of stone, and it's I think about 15 miles south of here. It's in Andover, Massachusetts, and Mr. Goodwin knew about it in the 30s. It's a really neat. It's all built out of stone and earth, and it looks like a turtle if you look down. Like same type of thing you'd see out west. Some of the effigy mounds in Minnesota or out in. I'm trying to think of some of the other. Like in Ohio.
Yeah, Ohio, Indiana. Yeah,
Indiana. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Same type of thing in New England, and nobody knows who built it. They don't know what it is. You don't know how old it is, but it aligns with our true south alignment at our museum. So you go true south. We have a true south wall. Actually, if you just kind of went along that and continued. We should do it with a drone someday. I don't know if people get upset with that, but you could actually just go down there and you go right over that anyway. We could video it. Video, it'll be a nice film. You could actually, photograph it going right over from our site and go right over that turtle mound. To the southwest, if you go into Mexico, and it goes right by, I think it's the Moon Pyramid at Teotihuacan. He hasn't done as much research in, checking the accuracy of that, but I've been to that site back in the 80s with my dad, and I think it's a Pyramid of the Moon, I think it goes by.
Wow. What are the odds? What Stonehenge?
I know.
I mean, what are the... When I was watching... this is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Bespoke radio for the masses. We are talking with Dennis Stone of America's Stonehenge. Dennis, what are the odds? What are the odds? When I was watching that line go across, and I was thinking, okay, where's it? It's not going to go to Stonehenge. It's going to go to something else. It's not going to Stonehenge.
No way.
and I would have been excited, wherever it landed, but it went right smack through the heart.
I know.
Of Stonehenge.
It's amazing. It really is amazing. I know it. We found that over 2 years ago. It's still it's still pretty amazing. Yeah.
If you line that thing up to Göbekli Tepe, then we
right.
But I'm sure that'll be next.
Yeah. Well, if you continue south on that over the Turtle Mound in Andover, Mass. The line goes really close to Machu Picchu, but I think that one needs to be looked at a little bit closer. That one may or may not be. He said it does, and then he kept checking it, and it didn't, then it did. So, some of our listeners, if they're really good at that, check that out too. And it's all World Heritage Sites. The one that goes over the equinox on the sunrise actually goes over the Azores, some of the pyramids in the Azores, which I wasn't even aware of the pyramids there, but they're really. We got a picture on our wall. We got a big world map, and we got it off the internet. We put pictures of these places all over the world that are ancient megalithic sites on this big map we have here, and I got a picture of that, and they're pretty cool looking pyramids. But that equinox sunrise goes right by them too, or right over them.
Is Kelsey getting up in the middle of the night, going out there, moving some stones around?
Just to make it work. Yeah.
Is that right? Well, you know what? If he needs if he needs some help, I'll come out there. We'll nudge a couple.
It's not quite working. Yeah, we'll move it a little bit.
That is, it's just absolutely amazing.
Yep.
Okay, let's get to some ley line research too as well. What have you guys found there?
Well, that's part of it. Some of these sites like the Andover site align with us, and then there's a few other sites, but there's so many of them in New England that, again, it goes back to, is it a coincidence that this is aligned with it, or is it intentional? They're saying the same thing in Europe. There's some of the 50,000 megalithic sites. Like I think Stonehenge aligns with, Avebury and Old Salisbury, and Old Sarum, actually. My dad and I visited that. It's all one line, and I guess it was noticed in the late 1800s that some of these sites were in alignment with one another, and then they wondered, is this intentional, Was somebody deliberately doing this? And I think it gets into that sacred geometry of the Earth, where there's special places in the Earth where there's more energy, and people will set up a site, and then they happen to be aligned with one another. And I don't understand the whole thing myself. It's something that, I want to learn more about, actually. And if it does actually happen, or is it a coincidence, So I think that's the thing. People are arguing it's coincidental or it's intentional. But some of the sites are definitely in line with straight as an arrow, And I think that was demonstrated over with Stonehenge and Old Sarum and I think Glastonbury, but they show a line. I think Alfred Watkins is the guy that got involved with that. I think at the time period 18 something.
Well, and it's also very consistent. It's
yeah.
It's one of those things where you have to. I hate to say that word coincidence, but
yeah, I know.
You have to take that out of the play once it happens over and over and over again, and the angles are consistent. And then you look at the Earth as a whole, and you start running these ley lines around the globe. It's very, very, very consistent. It's not so much that they exist. I know that they do, but it's how did they figure it out back then? That there was some power here. There was something magnetic going on in the Earth's core. Whatever. But how do you figure that out? 3, 4, 5,000 years ago. That's my point, and that's what I find so intriguing when it comes to ley lines.
Yeah, it needs more study, I think. Yeah, it is very fascinating. And our hill does have an earthquake fault line that goes through the center of it. It's basically the whole hilltop. It's bedrock. It goes down miles, but the whole hill is cracked in half. And you can see the fault line that goes right through, and it runs east and west. And it goes out to the ocean into what they call the Clinton-Newbury fault line. And when we have earthquakes in New England, they do happen quite a bit. They say that sometimes there's a lot of quartz up there. There's quartz, there's mica, there's feldspar that makes up the granite. And when it's under stress, it actually gives off an illumination. I haven't seen it myself. I think that'd be pretty cool. But we've had a lot of geologists, and Scott is a geologist, and we've had geologists from the Western Observatory at Boston College. We've had Pat Hume. Her husband, she's the archaeologist who's been working on the site. Her husband was a doctor at Tufts University. So get a really good idea of what our hilltop is, what type of rock it is, and the crack through the center of it's an earthquake fault line. And we have a well called the Upper Well. And my dad, there's two wells, an upper and lower well, a man-made well, and this one goes down about 23 feet. It's right in the paddy area, but there's no water in it other than when it rains or when there's a snow melts. There's no spring of water in it whatsoever. It's dry most of the year, most of the summer anyway. And my dad in 1963 went down there to clean up debris. There's all sorts of rocks people threw in there and debris, dirt and everything. And when he got down to the bottom of it, about the last couple feet was solid bedrock. Somebody had actually quarried through it. and they found a vein of quartz crystal in that well. So, we don't know what the well was used for, but one thing it could have been is like a mine shaft to take out these quartz crystals, and we do have them on display in our building. We know a lot of ancient people kind of worship quartz crystals.
What about the astronomical alignments? How many, with the stones that are out in the woods that you guys have revealed, the monoliths, how many of those are there, and what do they align to? The next question we're going to get to after you answer that is, have you backdated those alignments?
Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, we started in the 1960s, and we knew of some of these stones, but as the research progressed over the years, we found alignments with the summer solstice, sunrise and set, winter solstice, sunrise and set, spring and fall equinox, rise and set. We also found stones that align with the ancient Celtic holidays, such as November 1st.
What?
And that's, the day after Halloween or All Souls Day. Or
right.
Samhain is the Celtic word. We found the February 1st alignment, which is around Groundhog Day and Candlemas today, but it has a Celtic name too. I think it's Imbolc, I believe it is. May Day is Beltane. We have that alignment. And that's a very large stone. That one's about almost 10 feet tall. It looks like a gigantic arrowhead, and it has fallen over. And we have the August 1st. So we have the quarter days, which are your 4 seasons, and we have the cross-quarter days. And we also have alignments with the moon. The moon goes through the 18.61-year cycle, and like some of the European sites like Stonehenge, and some of the stone circles in Scotland, I think there's about 700 of them, they do track the lunar major north and south, the lunar minor north and south. We have those. We also have, 1973, we realized we needed somebody to come in and professionally survey the walls and these monoliths if we were going to continue the research. And we hired a professional survey team to come in, and they worked part-time up to 1977. So over 4 years, they surveyed the site, what we called Phase A. Phase B would be further out, and we haven't really got to that yet. But we did do all the astronomical alignments that we're aware of, and they sent that data to the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics in Cambridge, Mass. And the results came back was couple of interesting things. One of them, they said that if your site was used for astronomical purposes, it won't work today. However, it would work about 1800 BC, plus or minus a couple of centuries. And that is almost 4,000 years ago, the same time as that 4,000-year-old carbon dating. So it seemed to support that date. So
there we go.
Dating,
yeah.
And you have the astronomical alignment seeming to support that, which is really, really good. That was really, in the late 70s, that was amazing to us, that we had something supporting a carbon dating. They also said that you have 24 star alignments or stellar alignments up there. We knew of the north one with Polaris, because little over 4,000 years ago, the star was Thuban. Due to precession of the Earth's axis, it changes very slowly. And today it's Polaris, but 4,000 years ago. And the Great Pyramid of Cheops, they put it back around 4,600 years. I know some people think it's older than that, but that's when Thuban was the pole star. And so this star, the Thuban, was over our stone when they were building our site. But we have 23 other star alignments that we weren't aware of, which was, and we're still researching that. We think we have some helical sunrise alignments, maybe with Sirius or Eldad. We have to do more work on that. And Dr. Winkler was working on that when he passed away about 10 years ago. He was from the University of Penn, the Yaku astronomer. So that was really a loss to us. He was just getting involved with trying to go through that and research that to see what alignments we do have with the stars.
I would think that Graham Hancock and Robert Bauval and Robert Schoch, these guys would be all over this site and lining it up and looking to see what was going on. Because certainly the Celtic holiday connection is an interesting one, and one that, who else would do it besides a Celtic crew coming over from Europe? That's the only thing that would make sense there. As far as I know, American Indians weren't celebrating Celtic holidays 4,000 years ago.
Right. Yeah, they are Celtic holidays for sure, and we have the inscriptions that are Celtic Ogham, have been found not only at our site, at other places, all the way out to the Milk River in Canada. A couple thousand miles from here, they've been found out there, and elsewhere too. I think in Virginia, Wyoming County, West Virginia. So the Ogham, the Phoenician and Libyan script were found on our site, but they've been found elsewhere, and in Vermont too. Quite a few chambers up in Vermont. One of them was just put in the National Register of Historic Sites, and it was just a couple of years ago. We're very pleased with that. You have to go through the state and do all the paperwork and all the red tape that goes along with it, and then they submit it to Washington, I think. And one of the stone chambers up there, I think it's called Calendar One Site, and it's Astronomical alignment. I believe it has some Celtic inscriptions on it, is on the National Register of Historic Sites, which gives it a little bit of protection, but recognition, and maybe hopefully draws up some interest, for researchers and people,
Right now, there's so much interest in giants in America. History Channel's got the new show, In Search of Giants. You have L.A. Marzulli and all of his research. There's so much talk about giants in America right now. And we look at America's Stonehenge, and those are big rocks. And it's easy to make this connection. But I'll say this. I've got a couple of emails now. It's all over Twitter. They want me to ask, is there any evidence of giants on this site?
Well, that I wasn't even aware of the giants other than stuff in the Bible and, hearing little stories until just the last couple of years. And we were on L.A. Marzulli's show, as a matter of fact. My son got to talk to him, I think, about right after Scott's show came out. And I think he did it out of L.A., as a matter of fact.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, it was really great. And I became more aware of some of the finds. And Jim Vieira and his brother are both near. They have spoke at the NEAR meetings. I believe they're members of NEAR, just like Scott Walters. So my dad would be pleased to know that a couple of these, they got their own shows now. But in New Hampshire, there's been a couple of, like Lake Winnipesaukee, the beautiful lake up in central New Hampshire. I was just reading the book about that, and all of a sudden I came across a passage in there about how in the 1800s they discovered the bones of a giant, and I think it was somewhere over between 7 and 8 feet tall. And then you have seen the show on History Channel with Jim Vieira. It was on last night, as a matter of fact, talking about the Goshen site, which my dad knew about in the 60s, And but these skeletal remains have been found in a number of places. The problem is actually they were found in the 1800s, sometimes in the 1700s. Where are these bones today? That's my only thing. I'd love to see this, the actual evidence of this. But we haven't, again, on this site, we only found a few pieces of bone, so we don't have any really, big skeletal remains. But in this area, they have found supposedly some large skeletons, over 7 feet.
Has anyone ever observed, this is from Renee, or measured any electrical or any other anomalies around the site?
Let's see. We've done paranormal. People have brought up different types of magnetic. Actually, there's a company in our hometown that makes the ground penetration radar, and they also have a thing I think they call the ski, and it's magnetic resonance of some type, and they ran that up there on a hill. They were our neighbors right down the street here, and then they moved downtown Salem about 8 miles from here. And in the 90s, they were bringing this equipment up here, demonstrating it to their customers from all over the world. And their equipment's, pretty much every time you turn on TV, you see their equipment being used, and it's made right in our hometown, which is pretty cool. But I was going to say I'm not too aware, other than people say that there's compasses up on our site, they tend to deviate quite a bit. It might be because of something in the rock. There's a metal fence up there also. But I'd love to see more ground penetration radar used on our hilltop, and that new LiDAR, which I think would be incredible, that LiDAR equipment they've been using. That's been on Scott's show. I think that will be able to see things that you can't see when you're walking around on the ground. I
would think, I was going to ask you about ground penetrating radar. I would think you would have your own unit by now.
Oh, that's great. I know it was at 50 or 60,000 in the mid-'90s, and they would bring it up here, and we get to work with our archaeologists. Our archaeologists, like the ones that were up here at the time, we were working with their people, and it was great because we ran it over some of the underground drains. We ran it over our chambers. We ran it over where we think a chamber once collapsed from a hurricane in the late 1940s, and all you see now is just a little indentation in the ground. And when they ran it over there, they said, yeah, if you go down about 6 feet, you have a flat floor there. And we haven't actually excavated that structure. And that was in 1995 they ran the radar over that chamber. It's a matter of having resources and people, that can do this type of work up here. I'd love to have that chamber opened up, for instance.
Yeah, LiDAR over the site too would be totally revealing because there's so much foliage and so many trees.
Absolutely.
I can only imagine. How easy is it to walk around up there? Is it?
It's pretty good, yeah. We've been thinning out the woods for years, so you can get all over the hilltop pretty well. Some of the other New England sites, when you go there, you almost have to bushwhack your way to some of the chambers because they're out in the middle of nowhere and they're real thick woods, there's brush and everything, poison ivy. And but our site is compared to those, it's very, very easy to get to, all over the hilltop.
What are the stones made of?
It's granite. It's called gneiss, or I've heard it being called bastard granite. But it's granite that's foliated, does come up in layers, and has quartz, mica, and feldspar in it, and also quartz crystals. And other than that, other stone, when they found that workshop area to the south of the site, when they were doing one of those shovel test pits, that material I think was rhyolite, and it came from just north of Boston. So most of the rock that's here either was brought in by the glaciers, or we have a lot of boulders up there that were deposited by the glaciers, like part of the watch house. There's a very large boulder that is on the right side of it. But most of the stones are just from the hilltop.
Any ET activity? Any UFO activity over the site?
I haven't seen any, but in Exeter, New Hampshire, they had the incident at Exeter in the 1960s, and Pease Air Force Base is not too far from us, and that was a SAC base, Strategic Air Command, with the B-52s, nuke bombs, and everything back in the 60s, and then the F-111s, and they went on alert during that. And it was police officers from Exeter, and it was quite the when you read about it, it's amazing, what these guys saw, and that was in the 60s. And because Barney and Betty Hill in New Hampshire also had their incident up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. If there's any, I go out a lot at night on top of the hill because we live on the other side of it, and I look up and hoping to see something, like that. I haven't yet. Not that it hasn't happened, but I just haven't seen it.
Anybody else have a sighting around there? Any stories about that in the past?
Not that I'm aware of, but down in the Westchester and Putnam County area of New York, up the Hudson River, it's kind of like the Boyne Valley of Ireland. And I remember when my dad and I were over in Ireland, and there was like 200 megalithic sites on that river, in the Boyne River. If you go north of New York City, there's about 200 of these megalithic sites. It's the highest concentration of these sites I think, in the New World. And that area, they have seen a number of UFOs. In fact, I think the show with Bill Burns, I think, it's, what was the name of that? It was UFO Hunters, I think?
Yep.
They showed some of these chambers. I'm looking at it one night, and my dad was still alive, and I said, Dad, flip it on. They got some of these stone structures, and they had one of the structures had a beautiful monolith right in the front entrance of it. It was astronomical line. So if you're in the chamber looking out, you'd see this big, tall monolith. It was a very large one. And then whatever was they didn't say what was the alignment was. They were looking for UFOs, but it was a beautiful chamber with a great big monolith in front of it. But that's the Hudson Valley in New York and kind of near the Connecticut border. And,
I wonder if Bill has been to the site. He's listening to the show right now, Bill and Nancy.
Love to have him up here.
Absolutely.
We've had MUFON up here. And in fact, they're going to have like a field trip up here. I think they're over on the seacoast is where their headquarters for New Hampshire and New England is located. And they've been here a couple of times. But, we always welcome them. We met Betty Hill 40 years ago. And she stayed a friend of my mom's till she passed away several years ago. Their story was so fascinating.
Yeah, I want to save that for last. We're going to save
sure,
We're going to save that for last.
Yeah.
Nancy, Bill, if you guys are listening, have Bill call in if he's been to America's Stonehenge. I would love for Bill to call in, and he's got my number, and I know he's listening right now. Okay, let me get to some of these questions here on Twitter really quick. This is from Lou. He says, so can we find any of Dr. Fell's Harvard research online on the inscriptions with the Phoenicians? Is that out there?
Well, the group he had was called the Epigraphic Society, and he was the president of that. The Western Epigraphic Society is still in existence, and I think you could Google that, Western Epigraphic Society. And he had published the occasional publications, and he also wrote several books. One of them is America BC. Came out in 1976, bicentennial of the United States, and then it went into a couple other printings, and I think he updated it in 1994, just before he passed away. So he died 20 years ago, and I talked to him on the phone about the latest things that were going on at that time. I remember speaking to him, and I didn't realize he was going to pass away, right after that. I was kind of shocked to hear that. By then, he had moved to San Diego for his health. I guess he needed a warm climate, so he was living on the West Coast at that time. He wrote Bronze Age America and Saga America. But the occasional publications, he did many of those. And he had about 1,200 members in his group at the time during the 1970s and 80s, so there was a lot of other people contributing to that also. So I think if they Google that, they can find out, people are still doing work on that. But he did pass away 20 years ago, but it's still out there. His information's still there. We still sell his book in our bookshop. We have a book corner.
Any spiral Indian carvings, of spiral shapes that we find out here in the Southwest?
Not on our site that I'm aware of, or any of the other New England sites. Although last night on the Giant, the Lost Giant show, they showed Bellows Falls in Vermont on the Connecticut River, and they show these petroglyphs, so these very strange-looking heads on people and stuff. And I got a glance at that, and I'd have to see that again to see if there's anything like that on those. There was a whole bunch of petroglyphs right by the river there, and they showed it a couple of times, but it was so quick I didn't get a chance to. And I was aware of those from NERA. NERA had done a number of. NERA puts out a journal. They've been putting that out since 1967. They were formed in 64, and their journals have. You go back and you see these things like you've forgotten about, like, oh yeah, somebody did a report on that, 50 years ago almost, But not that I'm aware of any spirals on our site or any of the other sites that I can think of. Somebody else out there may be aware of it, if they're listening.
What can we see? One last question from Twitter. I'll get all of these out of the way. With all of the carbon dating that's been done, some of it can be questionable. Carbon dating is not exactly accurate all the time. Do you think the site could actually be older than 4,000 years?
Well, we do know that somebody was up there 7,200 years ago. It's possible it's older. The way the stones are shaped, it's Stone Age technology, so that puts it back to a time period of, the Stone Age. But the astronomical alignments seem to work about 1,800 BC plus or minus about 200 years, and the oldest carbon dating in the main site's about 4,000 years. But no doubt, people were on the hilltop going back over 7,000 years. Did they do any of the stonework up there? We really don't know. Our best guess is probably about 4,000 years ago when the construction was going on. But it's possible somebody was up there doing something earlier.
And one last question from Twitter. This is the last one. But, for the next few minutes, I should say. With the sacrificial table, that's what it looks like to me. Blood drains. It looks like something straight out of some kind of corners. Let's not go there. But that's what it looks like to me. What makes you say sacrificial?
People have looked at the table, and some people thought maybe it's a cider-press, or perhaps it's a lye-stone for making soap. It's the ones that I've seen that make the lye-stones are usually something I could pick up by myself. They're usually about the base of a 55-gallon drum, with a groove on it.
Right.
Kind of like a very small scale size of our table, very small, and you could pick it up by yourself. And other people thought maybe it's an embalming table, just a ceremonial table, maybe it is a sacrificial or a birthing table, There is a site about 70 miles southwest of us. It's called Mineral Mountain, or Mount Mineral, in Shutesbury, Massachusetts. And there was a farmer, supposedly, that lifted up the stone back, I forget, it was, maybe over 100 years ago. And he turned the stone over and had this anaglyph, a raised carving. And when you look at it today, it looks like our table. It's got that bell shape to it. The outside of it's shaped like a bell. And it has like a person laying on the back with their legs spread. And so they're on the back, and the front left leg just next to that foot, just beyond the foot, there's a circle. And on our table, that's where the runoff is, or the little runnel. If you look at the rectangular groove, there's a runnel. It's not symmetrical. It's off to the side. And that's right where that, and if you go down below to the bedrock, there is a cutout in the bedrock where like a vase could sit today at our site. It looks like somebody might have seen something going on our site. Some people suggest the position of that person, that carving of that person looks like it's maybe it's where they were having a birth, or is it a sacrifice? We don't know. But somebody may have been so taken by this whole experience at our site when they went back to this site 75 miles away, thousands of years ago, they created this carving. And next to the carving are stone chambers like ours, dry stone construction, no cement, big stone roofs, which is not typical of what our forefathers, during the colonial and post-colonial period did. That's what makes our chambers different, from colonial and post-colonial. We have big stone roofs, dry stone construction, and no modern tool markings. But that site is about 75 miles. That carving is used for the NERA logo today. They've been using it since 1964. So if you Google NERA, you'll see the logo. That's basically that stone they use for their logo.
Well, when you look at the sacrificial table, it's obvious that is blood and body fluid runoff channels that has been used forever, for millennia. That's exactly what that looks like. It can't really be used for anything else, but why would you carve something like that 100 years ago, 200 years ago? You wouldn't do it out of stone.
It doesn't make any sense.
No,
right.
It doesn't make any sense. That's exactly what that looks like.
Yeah.
And you know what? I got to say, there's a serious amount of creepy to that, because you can only imagine what was going on that table, and that's exactly what there's no other use for it.
There are a couple other tables similar to that in New England. One out near what they call a Quabbin Reservoir. It's a water source for Boston, and it's a man-made lake, basically. It's pretty large, and when they flooded it, supposedly a number of chambers were flooded. They're underwater now, stone chambers. That may be related to our site, perhaps. Also, a big stone table came from there. They actually they did remove that. They put it in the Farm Museum in Hadley, Massachusetts. And there's different theories of that it's a limestone or it is another stone like ours. It's very large. There's two others in New England, but there's one that one of our researchers in the 1960s went to Portugal, and he took a picture of it, and over there they believe it's a sacrificial table. It looks like our table, except it's shaped more like a maple leaf with that groove on it. And the idea over there, or the theory, is that it was used for sacrificial purposes. And near the Douro River in Portugal, there are chambers that are very reminiscent of our site, not only our site, but other New England sites, and it's the same latitude that we're on, too.
Any traces of blood or anything? I know it's been out in the elements, but, or around the table, anything like that at all?
That's a really good question. I wonder myself whether technology someday they'll be able to test it and say, look, there's blood on this table. I don't know if we have the equipment today. I don't know if some forensic people could get in here and look at that and analyze that, or maybe even with Scott and his equipment. But the top of the table has been, as Scott mentioned when he was there, he says stone is starting to wear on that table from being exposed. So the original surface is probably almost gone today. Would blood go into the stone a little ways,
Right,
the top surface is kind of worn away, unfortunately,
Right. If you want to see the stone that we're talking about, we just retweeted it. So just go to @JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet, a close-up of the sacrificial table has just been posted. It's creepy. I'm looking at the enlargement here, and it's obvious. It's obvious what it's. That is. Those are drains, and that's pretty heavy. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, bespoke radio for the masses. We are talking with Dennis Stone of America's Stonehenge. And if you have any email that you would like, or if you have any questions you'd like to email, send it to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can also do that over at the website and go to the contact page. You can do it in confidence. Just make it good. Make it get past the producers here, and it will make it in here to me, and we'll get that straight to Dennis. Betty and Barney Hill. Strange connection here. How far from America's Stonehenge was their abduction?
Well, it was probably about, it's a ways away. It was probably about 90 miles. It's up on Route 3, right up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And Betty actually was from Exeter, New Hampshire, which is right down the street from us. That's where she was born and grew up. And then she moved to Portsmouth, New Hampshire on the seacoast. But, yeah, that took place, I think, in the around 61, I think it was, something like that, early 60s. And it was probably about 90 miles from here.
It's one of my favorite. It's the original book, An Interrupted Journey. I found when I was a kid, and I found it in a house. Anyway, I read that from cover to cover, flipped it over, read it again, flipped it over. Just unbelievable story. And it means a lot to me. But here you knew Betty, she knew your family. Please, just for me, what was it like speaking to her?
Oh, it was pretty awesome. It was about 40 years ago, 1974, and it was around this time, I think, she came down, and she came in, visited the site. She took the tour, and it was really, really neat to meet her. And I think the reason she came in here, we had another guest here, Hans Holzer, who wrote books like The Ghost I Met and everything, and I think she wanted to see him and visit the site, so she killed two birds with one stone. And then my mom remained a friend of Betty's until she passed away. They sent Christmas cards, and my mom visited her at her home over there, and vice versa. But we never met Barney. He had passed away, I think, in '67 from cancer, I think.
Right.
So we never had an opportunity to meet him. But the story was pretty amazing. And I think when she visited us, the NBC movie came out, and Estelle Parsons played her, and James Earl Jones played Barney.
That's
right. It was called The Interrupted Journey. It was a pretty cool movie.
It's a great movie.
Yeah, it was pretty good. I wish I'd repeat that, but I haven't seen it since probably 40 years ago. So, but I remember at the time it was a pretty neat movie. Yeah, definitely.
How old were you? You and I are similar in age, I think. You might be younger than me, but how old were you when you met Betty?
Would have been 20 years old.
Oh, you were 20?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was born in 54, so like I say, my dad got involved with this in 55, so I was about a year old when my dad got involved with this, and 20 when I met Betty.
Okay, so you were a young man. You had your wits about you. You knew who she was.
Yeah.
What did you ask her? What did you talk about?
I think we listened to her tell the story, and it was pretty interesting. And because there were a lot of people. All of a sudden, she had a lot of people around her, so it got kind of crowded there, in the museum. And but she brought her gray with her, and that was pretty cool. I don't know who made it up, but it was the head of a gray, one of the aliens. And she talked about her and her husband and how they've been in Montreal, and they were on vacation, and how they came back, and kind of how the story goes. And they saw a light in the sky, and then they ended up with these nightmares. And I think on the car they had some sort of some sort of dots or something on the car that went unexplained, and I think their dog had some sort of markings too.
Right.
And then because she had the stains on her clothes, and those clothes have been saved,
Right.
And how they stuck a needle into her abdomen, I think, and I guess she incredible pain, But she also mentioned they showed her a star chart.
Yeah, that's right. So she relayed all of this in the museum. Well, hold on for a second. Hold on, let's back up.
Cool.
she had she's carrying a gray head around with her, a gray alien head.
Yeah, it was really neat too. It just somebody had taken her information and made a gray head out of it, and it was pretty cool.
So this was like I don't want to make light of this, but this is I've never. So she said, "Hold on for a second," and she runs out to her car and comes back with a gray head. Is that kind of how
something
it went
like
down?
that? Yeah, either that she brought it up, but she might have even had something over it and then pulled it off. It was 40 years ago, and I just remember seeing her and then seeing this head. And I'm like, wow, that is pretty cool, But I think the star thing really got me because I was always interested in astronomy. I took it up in college, as one of my electives, and actually my professor. Still was bringing students until just recently we retired, and I had him back in the late 70s, But I was always interested in astronomy. When she starts talking about the star chart that this alien showed her, and when she revealed this in the late 60s, nobody knew what the heck she was talking about.
No.
I think 1972, by then the technology would be able to look deeper into space, and they actually used computer, and they said, this does exist.
Well, we didn't have the fascinating thing about that aspect, and let's talk about that for a second, if you don't mind, because you talked to her about this directly, so I would like to know. But that is one of the if you take Betty and Barney Hill's case in its totality, okay, it's a fascinating event, but when you get to the black and white stuff, for me, it's that star chart. And the way that she drew it and so forth, and how she described it, and trade routes and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
But back then, we didn't know what was out there. We didn't have the satellites. We didn't know. We didn't we didn't go beyond the sun. We didn't go behind the sun. There was a lot of things that we didn't know. But it was a school teacher in Ohio that listened to Betty's story, looked at the star charts, and she started to do a 3D model with strings and so forth, put together a 3D model and was looking at it, and with modern technology built the star map, her version of the star map in 3D, and went back and looked at Betty's star map, and she had an aha moment and went, look, here it is. Well, Betty couldn't have possibly known when she drew the original star map any of this information. And that, for me, was something that, was it solid confirmation? Would it hold up in court? I'm not so sure about that, but it is something that goes beyond coincidence to me.
That's how I feel, too. Yeah, after seeing that, it seems like it certainly gives a little bit more credence to what she was saying, and it took, I think, about 5 years from the time she actually, under hypnosis or however she did it, showed what this map was with the trade routes and the minor routes, and then 5 years later saying, yeah, that does exist, so that seems interesting, Very interesting.
A picture of Betty and her gray head has just been tweeted.
Oh, okay.
And I'm looking at it here. You have to love our audience, Dennis. They are on top of their game.
They are.
If you want to, again, at J Church Radio, hashtag DMRadioNet. Bob, thank you for this. And I'm looking at Betty. She's holding it up. So I'm sure it's the same one that you saw. It's a bust. The shoulders are there, and you can see the ass. It looks like a gray, but it also it's got a human element to it.
Yeah.
Is that how it struck you?
That's how it struck me. Yeah. And it was 40 years ago that we saw that. And I think my mom still has the photographs when she was here. I should get those photographs from my mom. My mom's 95 years old, and I should make some duplicates of those, and keep them in our archives, in case they get lost. But that's great that they found that. That's super.
Oh, our audience is on top. What did you ask her about the star chart? Since you were studying this in college, you were interested. What did you ask her?
She was explaining that to us. I didn't have to ask her too much. Actually, she was talking about, but this is 74. 2 years actually, they actually proved that that constellation existed. So she was going on about that. And I don't remember what questions I might have asked her because there's so many people there. That there was probably a couple dozen people around her. She was like the center of attention. And I probably was just listening more than asking. But we met, we hugged, and all that stuff, and introduced everybody. And then we gave her the tour up there. And I know my uncle was there. He's still alive. He's one of the founding NERA members. He's probably one of the only founding NERA members. He's 93, and he was a World War II B-17 and B-29 pilot. Got shot down in Belgium. There's a story about that. But that's one of the reasons I took up flying. And because space has interested me. And Alan Shepard had a camp right down the street. We think he played up here when he was kids, so space has always been around me. So it's always been an interesting. But Betty Hill's story is it was really good. It was really, really neat to meet her, way back then for sure.
Alan Shepard's birthday was yesterday, by the way.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
no kidding. My mom, sister used to do his mother's hair, and I'd see her under the hairdresser all the time. And they had a camp right down the street from here. And actually one of the books written that has us in it, Alan Shepard actually endorsed the book. It was called Abenaki Warrior, about a chief that was knighted by King Louis XIV. He fought against the English for the French, and he was a superhero, and he came by this site. There's a couple of, like Passaconaway's a famous Indian chief, and he is believed to have been up in our site too. So there's some, Passaconaway in New England's a big name, a very famous Indian chief, and and Chief Nescom Bewitt also. And he was on the same island. Alan Shepard's family has an island on this lake next to us, and the family still owns it. He died in 1998. But
Yes.
Before he died, he actually endorsed a book. And we think he played up here on the site with many of the other kids from that lake, when they came up in the summer.
I want to get back to Betty, but did you meet Alan? Did you?
Well, we saw him when he paraded in town after the 1961 launch, and also when he landed on the moon, I think in 1970, played golf up there. But I met his mother many times. In fact, his father was our insurance agent.
Oh, man.
And, the second signer of the Declaration of Independence is Josiah Bartlett, and Alan Shepard, middle name is Bartlett. It's Alan Bartlett Shepard. His dad's name was Bartlett Shepard. And on the mother's side, it goes back, and it's Josiah Bartlett, which Martin Sheen played in the West Wing, a New Hampshire governor. He was a president of New Hampshire, then the governor of New Hampshire, and he was a doctor, a lawyer, spokesman, and he signed the Declaration of Independence right after John Hancock. That's Alan Shepard's family. It's the same family.
See, we don't have that kind of history out here in California.
Well, you probably have some, but yeah, a little different.
Oh, no. I
say
it all
you get the Chinese anchors off the coast, that might be something kind of cool.
Yeah. No, the only thing we have is In-N-Out Burger. Okay, that's the only thing that we have.
We'll have to visit that then.
Back to Betty, though, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Did she seem credible? And I don't mean that in a negative sense. I'm just saying, did she, was her demeanor there? Were you, wow, this really happened to this woman?
She seemed sincere, and she certainly was passionate about it, totally passionate about the whole thing, And, we're going back 4 decades, so my memory's not quite, what it was. It's been so long. But she definitely always seemed passionate. She always, maintained the same story. She was very, interested, excited about it. I think she did a lot of speeches about it, too. She went around and talking about it. I saw her on TV a number of times, too. But in person, she seemed very, very sincere about it. It didn't seem like she was making anything up, or she had a really wild imagination. I wish I could have met her husband, too, and you can kind of see both of them talking,
Right.
But I didn't have that opportunity. But she did definitely seem, sincere. She believed her story, I think.
When she was with your mom, did she talk about the event, or was she just your mom's friend? And
She became more like a friend, yeah. My mom heard the story and everything, and they became kind of friends. My mom went over. I think Betty's mom was alive at the time, 40 years ago. My mom went over and saw both of them over in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I think she just became friendly, and then Christmas cards, that kind of thing, and correspondence, and then they'd visit each other once in a while. I think Betty died almost 10 years ago. I was listening to the, I think it was the Art Bell show, and it might have been his guest host there. It said, our good friend of ours unfortunately passed away today, and I was on our way home from one of my flights, and I heard it in the morning, I think it was, and they said Betty Hill died. I went, oh my God, and I'll have to tell my mom, so we didn't know she was sick, so that was quite the really. I was early in the morning when I heard that too. So.
Here's a question that just came into Twitter, and again, this is something I was thinking about earlier when you mentioned this. Were any of the drains that surround the site, anything connect to the table or point to the table?
No, the rectangular channel does go off on that little runnel, and it goes into the a notch in the bedrock where you could even set a base if you wanted to. But the drains are really interesting, and some of them go 75 feet in length. There's about a dozen of them, and they're actually, what they did is they quarried the bedrock. That is pretty hard rock, and you can see where they actually somehow made grooves in the very wide groups, several inches wide and a couple inches deep through the bedrock, and then they go into the underground drains. And if you don't have much soil on the hill 4,000 years ago, and you don't have much vegetation, anytime it rained or snow melted, it would puddle up. So these people engineered these drains before they built the structures. So it wasn't an afterthought. It was actually, they built a whole network of storm drains. Some people think there's something sacred to them. There may be more to them than just a practical purpose. But all I can say is they do keep the place dry, and they still work today. And they're a great place for looking for artifacts. Not all of these drains have been investigated yet, but a couple of them, they've actually removed some of the big, because they're parallel walls with big flat stones that weigh sometimes, a few hundred pounds. And like I say, some of these go 75 feet in length. and they actually were like storm drains. They kept the whole site dry, and they found artifacts in some of these drains over the years. So, but that's a good question. But nothing. The oracle chamber we haven't talked about is a chamber behind the table, and from the oracle chamber there's a horizontal tube that goes underneath the table. And if you stand on a step, I think Scott Walters demonstrates that on that show. The voice goes through that tube. It comes out under the table. And if you're standing above the table on a stone platform that's there, it sounds like the table or maybe a spirit or God is talking to you. And I visited the Oracle of Delphi in Greece and also in Malta. And in Malta, they have the same kind of thing, these holes in the rock. And the guide said, yeah, they would actually have like somebody in there and it would talk, and people thought it was spirit or God or something like that giving them commands. And the oracle chamber is really fascinating. It's got closets, it's got a deer carving, it's got an arrow carving. It has 2 underground drains, and it has these notched kind of carvings, and it has a bed in there too, actually about an 8-foot bed.
Oh, that was describe that. And when you enter the chamber, how tall is it, and how easy is it to get through? Are you on your hands and knees when you go in there?
Yeah, if you're somebody, my dad was 6'1" or 2. He could walk in there standing upright. Somebody about 6'5", I think, would just have to kind of watch their head a little bit. The entrance of it's between 6'5" and it's actually a little bit bigger at the beginning, and it gets a little bit shallow. But yeah, you can stand upright in it, no problem at all. And they actually moved a big boulder up there. It was split either by nature because of a lightning strike or just freezing action. This rock was 51 tons, and the other part of it was 27 tons, and they actually moved them apart. And then they built this chamber over it, on top of it. So they actually moved a stone that weighed 27 tons and 50 tons. It has a seat carved in there, and it has a chimney flue, and it had 2 stone louvers. And when we opened the site to the public in 1958, somebody stole them. But we have photographs from Malcolm Pearson's time and afterwards that these stone louvers were actually there, and they would adjust the draft. So it's pretty. They had a lot of details in that chamber.
Yeah, now, the oracle chamber is kind of T-shaped. And so to the east, is that the entrance?
The entrance is actually...
Or is the top of the T?
Yeah, it's. I think it's at the top. It's kind of from the west, and you enter it, and there's a drain, and you turn left, and then you go into it's about 28 to 30 feet long, running true north and south. And then there's the east part you mentioned. The east part is corbelled. That corbelled style of construction.
Right.
Yeah, it's like one stone over the other, like inverted staircase. And that's kind of interesting because they use that technique in megalithic sites over in Europe.
So when you first enter the chamber, what is to your left? Now this is 6 feet tall, so you can walk in.
Yeah, higher than that, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so you've got a hallway to your right, a hallway to your left. How many feet are we talking to your left into the first part?
Yeah, when you first enter it, and I think if you watch that show with Scotty, we enter the chamber, you can see us entering that chamber. And where we enter actually had a roof on it in the early photographs. Unfortunately, during the 1930s and 40s, people took those stones off there, so the chamber was actually larger. But as you enter it, you're kind of walking east, and then you take a left, and that part of the chamber is about 30 feet in length. And you're looking towards the end of it, towards the north, where the chimney flue is, where those stone louvers used to be. About halfway up there on your left is where the speaking tube is, and below the speaking tube on the bedrock, there's a step. And if about a 5.5-foot person, roughly, that's just a rough, if you stand on that step, I'm about 5'8", so if I stand there, I can put my head right in that tube, and I can yell. It's a perfect height with that step. And just by your knees is where that 8-foot underground bed is, actually. It's like and that has a window on it. And if you were laying in there, you can look out the window and see if anybody came into that chamber. I think the chamber was supposed to be secret to the population. We don't think people that came up there and did a ceremony would know about that chamber. And if they're standing above watching a ceremony, a voice coming out would be like the Wizard of Oz.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think the bed was used for? A guard?
Yeah, maybe a guard or maybe a maybe a priest or shaman or somebody could stay in there. Maybe they meditated in there. Maybe it was a god to keep, during the times when the site wasn't being used for ceremonial purposes, they wanted to keep people away. Only the builders would know about it, and probably the high priest and maybe a god. And that chamber is actually built. There's the whole top of that hill running north and south is like a ridge, and then the ridge kind of went down. What they did is it was like a gap where the ridge was. They actually make the chamber like part of the ridge. So when you're looking at the whole top of that hill, you don't even know there's a chamber there on the outside. When you're standing up looking down at the table, you don't realize really there's a chamber there.
Have you ever have you ever slept overnight?
Yeah, as kids, back in the early 70s, we had a lot of guides that worked up there. Several guys that were working with us, and we stayed up there. We watched the Planet of the Apes on top of the table, and we stayed inside the Oracle Chamber and slept in there. We didn't have any. We were all up there having a great time. We didn't have any mystical experience, but it was a little bit creepy, though. I have to admit that.
Now, as you continue down the hallway, when you go straight in, and now describe that to us.
As you're walking towards the north?
No, to the east.
Oh, to the east, yep. As you're walking to the east, first thing on your left by your left leg is a seat, and it's deliberately carved into that boulder. If you look opposite that, you can see the other side of the boulder, because there was one boulder at one time and it's been split and moved apart. You can see what the shape of it was, and somebody deliberately carved the seat there. If you sit in the seat, you're looking to the south. You're looking into this large closet. It's all dark in the closet too. The closet goes in, and then it goes around to the right of the wall. If you put your hand in there, it's like, wow. We used to have it illuminated, but in 1994 we put up a new visitor center, and they didn't let us run the same wires up there. So people go up there with their phones, and they can illuminate it with their cell phones and stuff. But there's a closet there. If you continue down on your left is where the deer carving is.
And how big is that, by the way, the deer carving?
Let's see, it's probably about 8 inches across, roughly. And it looks more like an ibex rather than a deer, but people always refer to it as a deer carving. I think Mr. Goodwin in the 1930s is the first one to report that. We don't know if people saw it before that, but he was the one that, brought it, and he photographed it and wrote about it. As you go down there, there's a drain, and there are 3 stone closets above the drain. The drain down there runs 45 feet. Just, again, possibly it does keep the chamber dry. A little kid could actually climb into that drain. That's how big it is.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's pretty strange looking, actually. But I suppose it is a drain.
That's what it looks like. And that exit there, where the public exits today, was actually a window. So there's only really one way into that chamber, is where you first went in. And it was like probably 7 feet tall at that point. And then that was a window looking towards the watch house, kind of looking in the southeast direction. And the deer carving's kind of opposite that. We don't know if the deer carving might have been one of those illumination effects. That's something we're going to have to go up there, and maybe we can set up a camera sometime and just, photograph it during the course of a year or something like that, and see if it does get illuminated by sunrise,
Right.
Some of these structures have that in New England,
Sure.
Illumination effect. It's pretty cool, and they do it in the Southwest, too.
How old do you think that deer carving is?
That I don't know. That's, is it something, a lot of they have vision quests, Native Americans or whoever these people were, and then they might even make a carving of what they saw in their vision. What does it mean? I don't know, but you find that kind of artwork on a lot of ancient sites.
It looks old, that's all. It just looks really old. It doesn't look 100 years old or 200 years old. It looks
old. It's in the rock. It's not where somebody scratched it with a rock.
Right.
You go up there and this is really actually carved into the rock. And it is, like you say, the weathering on it, although it's inside the chamber, is not fresh looking at all. And I think Scott's equipment and his technology, maybe something like that could be looked at. Once he gets more of that, what he's doing, more of it's proven. Like carbon dating in the 50s was kind of new, and not everybody accepted it. So Scott's work's kind of, I think some of his, but I think it's scientific. And I think he has real good potential to look at these, carvings, and even the big slabs were taken off the bedrock. And Scott says he can look at it and see, basically whether it was done recently or whether these stones were quarried centuries upon centuries ago because of the weathering effect on the rock. And I think that's still in its infancy, though. But I think that even that carving would be something we should look at. And the Phoenician, Celtic, and Libyan markings, too.
Well, why is it called the Crystal Well?
Well, that's when my dad went down to the bottom of that in 1963 to clean out all the debris. And when they got down to the bottom, I think the last couple of feet of it was solid bedrock, and they found a vein of quartz crystal in that upper well.
Any ghosts?
Yeah, we have during the fall, like last month, we have like the New England Ghost Project. They'll come up here and they bring all sorts of equipment. They've seen orbs, they've seen different shape-shifting kind of thing, and a lot of it's done on weekends when I'm on the road with the airline. I usually work during that. I have been to a couple of them. People have photographed things, they've felt things, they've heard things, that kind of thing. You know, it's like a layering of cultures up there. So if there's anything to that, you know, it might be, you know, different things they'd seen from different time periods, you know. But we have a pretty neat photograph. I think it might be on, I'm not sure if it's on our website. It was right in the patio area, and somebody just photographed it. Very misty looking. You know, was it something just a mist? But it looks like a person standing there. It was pretty cool. It's like the coolest one I've ever seen on the site.
Have there been reports over the years? And I'm going back. Let's go back. Has there been reports of ghosts or paranormal activity?
Well, we did have Hans Holzer up here back 20 years ago, and he brought in. That's when Betty Hill visited us also. But he brought in, I think, a psychic at that time. And I can't remember. I do remember that they found some unusual, however, the psychics, they can talk to spirits or whatever. She felt something, And at one point we sent some crystals out. I think from the well. I think somebody in California did the crystal reading. They have a name for that. And they described the people that were on the site as kind of not too tall, but very darker complexion, dark hair, and then somebody else separately did something, and it was like the same thing. It was interesting that these two, it could be coincidental, but they said the people look rather like a darker, maybe a Mediterranean kind of complexion, Maybe they were the Phoenicians, I don't know. And there were two separate people at two different times that did the same thing, And they have a name, but I can't think of the name of it. You read, they actually take the crystals and they can read from them,
Can you elaborate when you're talking about shape-shifting?
I guess I am not that familiar with that. My wife has been on a number of these with my son, and I guess they see things that can appear as animals or as people.
Ooh.
That kind of thing, And I think even my son saw something once when he was younger. I mean, when he was like, not even like 10 years old, he saw something like that, and he was telling my wife, and my wife goes, "That sounds like a shapeshifter." I don't know if we believe it or not, but he described that, So Kelsey was a little bit attuned to that, I think.
Where is he at right now? Is he there?
No, he's not. He's at home. He just got married a month ago. Marriage was on top of the hill. My wife and I got married up here back in '85, and he just got married. And he's got an engineering job, and he was doing some inside work on his house. He was doing some staircase tonight. So I was just over there with him just before I came back over here.
I didn't even think about it. We should have got him. I
would have loved. Great.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
He does have to get up early in the morning, though.
Well, you too. Are you flying tomorrow?
No, I'm off till Saturday. But I know he would have loved to. He would have loved to have talked about that alignment with Stonehenge. He could have explained his feeling and why he did it. That would have been kind of neat. But I think he's probably sleeping right now.
Now, let's get back to the site itself. Do you feel, is there power? Do you feel anything mystical, anything psychic when you're walking around the site?
I try to. I'm not as sensitive as some people, but I think it has this feeling of something very old, that there are people here for a long, long time, and that the place was a special place. And I get that same kind of feeling, and I don't know if it's, maybe a little bit of energy, but I've been to Stonehenge, Avebury, been to, Malta, and, sites up in Ireland and in Mexico and stuff like that. The spiritual sites, they always have sort of a special feeling to them, and the way, and then again, just the way the structures are set up and everything, very ceremonial kind of thing. And our site has that kind of design to it. And you were mentioning, why would a farmer build this? Actually, Patty was a shoemaker, but he did have some domestic animals. So everybody says, maybe the farmer built it up there. But it doesn't look like a New England farm or, colonial, post-colonial time period. It seems to have, it's on a hill, and a lot of ancient sacred places are on high places, either on top of a pyramid or on a hill. And that's one of the things about our site. We're on a kind of a high hill. And it has a really neat feeling, especially around the solstices and equinoxes. And we have a lot of people come up and do celebrations, and they say to me that they feel a special energy up on the hill. And even during the course of just a normal week, we have people that often say, this place has a special feeling to it. I feel an energy to it, a special connection to it, that kind of thing. So we hear that a lot,
What is the Gunge Wamp?
That's another one. That's another very interesting site in Connecticut, right near the Navy base. And it's about 200 acres of land. It has, in fact, one of the chambers looks just like our watch house. It has a large glacial boulder with a structure built around the left side of it. I mentioned there are 50 of them like our watch house. That's another one. Back in 1654, a guy named John Pynchon wrote to Governor Winthrop and said, who built something about a strong fort or stone walls or whatever? And 1654, somebody was already wondering what this site was down there. That's like one of the earliest recordings. And if you talk to skeptics, these type of sites are all built in the last couple of hundred years. Why would somebody in 1654 be talking about who built it then,
Bingo.
But it's a big site. It has chambers. It has carvings. It has a large circle that might have been some sort of for grinding purposes. But it has a pretty cool alignment, too. One of them is it has an illumination effect where the sunlight goes through the chamber and it goes to a back wall where there's, I believe, like a little closet. Maybe there was something in that closet, sacred. There's some Cairo figures or Christian figures carved into some of the rocks. So some people think it has a date that's more recent in our site, something around the 600 AD period. In St. Brendan's time period, some people try to make a connection with St. Brendan the Navigator, that kind of thing. But I think the jury's still out. They'll have to do more research. There was a society called the Gunge Wamp Society, and Dave Barron, he's passed away now. He had about 700 members, and not only did they research Gunge Wamp, but many of the southern New England sites too. But it's a really neat place, and I don't know if you can actually visit it. When Dave Barron was alive, he took tours like on certain Saturdays, and he had it all marked off, kind of like what we do, but they didn't have a visitor center or anything like that. I think the Native Americans were interested in the site, the Pequot Nation, I think, and also I think the state of Connecticut was interested in preserving it too. So I don't know how it stands right now. The ownership was going to change. It was YMCA property, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
And I don't know what the latest is on that. I haven't heard what's going to happen with it. Whether it's going to be sold or what's going to happen with it.
What do you do? I want to take a couple of phone calls. I haven't opened up the phone lines tonight, so I'm going to do that really quick. 323-825-5045. 323-825-5045. I've been fascinated and wrapped up with the conversation tonight. I was going to open up the phone lines 30 minutes ago. I completely spaced it. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are talking with Dennis Stone of America's Stonehenge, and I'll take a couple of calls really quick, and I will take them in order. I'm not going to cherry pick. I will take those in order. 323-825-5045. Dennis, what do you do with the debunkers? What do you do with the skeptics? How do you face them?
Everybody has their own opinion and right to their own opinion. I mean, what we do is offer the evidence that we have and a possible theory of what the site is. We tell them, about the carbon datings, about the inscriptions, about the way the stones were shaped using hammer stones, and place names in New England. It seems to be an overwhelming amount of evidence that there were people coming across the ocean, before Columbus and the Vikings. But you can't change some people's minds, of course, but we try to just put the information out there, and that's what we do with our museum here, is just put the information out and tell them what we know about the site, what evidence we have, and then we let people make up their own mind. But, it's not as much as it used to be. I think I started guiding here in 1970. In 1969, I was a little younger. I put bumper stickers on cars, and then the next year I was a guide, and used to hear a little bit more about that, being, more skeptics. But I think TV shows, new evidence, all this research that's gone on for over 44 years ago, has helped a lot. We have more information about these sites, not only our site, but other sites. Just the amount of sites in New England, like 800 of them, that are dry stone construction and all these different pieces of evidence we've already talked about tonight. But I think people are a little bit more open-minded today. But there are still some that,
of course,
and a hoax, a fake fraud.
I can tell that you're a nice guy. I can see that. But I'm talking about, what do you do with the guy that just wants to, put up his dukes. Oh, do you smack somebody? Have you ever smacked somebody?
Well, sometimes you might feel like that. It's just to wake them up, so they'll listen,
That's my point. So what is it when you need to just absolutely deal with somebody? What is it that you put on the table? How do you deal with it? You've got enough bullets in the gun. Where do you go first?
Well, sometimes they just want to, spout off what they think and say, it's a, this is more in the past, but it's a hoax, a fake, a fraud, it's misinterpretation, it's a bunch of baloney, that kind of thing. They're not even asking you for what you have for information. They just want to spout off and then walk away, basically,
Right.
And that's okay, But science, observation, comparison, experimentation, a little bit of open-mindedness, and a little bit of common sense is what we, try to have here, But I think, they got so many new tools today, so many new things that are coming out that it'd be a little bit hard for some of these people that, that are skeptics to look at the evidence and say it's a hoax, a fraud, or fake. I mean, they can still think that if they want, but there's some evidence suggesting it is not, I mean, even some of the early things like Verrazano coming over and reporting the Narragansett Indians, some having blue eyes, blonde hair.
Right.
The Beothuks up in Newfoundland, that kind of thing. It's nothing to do with race, but there is evidence that people were coming to these shores, and they actually might have intermarried with Native Americans. So you'd have like a Native American that might have the reddy complexion but have blue eyes or blonde hair. Verrazano, Roger Williams said that. Some of the explorers up in Newfoundland, even the Cherokee Indians say that their ancestors came from the east across the great, the Atlantic Ocean. Basically, the Cherokee. We'll talk about that today.
Well, you know what I would do? I'd say, hey, come here, lay down on this table.
We'll try it out.
Right.
It works. It works.
Lay down right here and get comfortable.
Yeah.
Hi, Steve. Say hi to Dennis. How are you tonight?
Dennis, what's going on, brother?
Hey, how you doing?
Doing just fine. Hey, I got a question for you, Dennis. You mentioned the other sites, the one in Wyoming County, West Virginia, which is really, really close to me. Has there been any study by anyone that shows any correlation whatsoever between the sites and some of the other sites on the East Coast?
Yes, I mean, there are some, yes. Nearer, New England Antiquities has been doing that. The Epigraphic Society has been doing that. They've looked at the inscriptions that have been found in New England and down in Boone County, Wyoming County, West Virginia. A gentleman named Pyle, I think it was in the 80s, did a lot of research on that. And Barry Fell from Harvard said, if you go there in the winter solstice, I think, the inscription says you'll see the sun rise over this peak, something like that. And the guy went back there, and he demonstrated it. It worked. So the inscription was correct. There was an alignment. But there are similar walls, cairns, dolmens, the big rocks with legs on them, found in your area all the way up to Canada, and actually going out west out to the Great Lakes. And I think Scott Walters has talked about the copper from Royal Isle.
That's right, from the Great Lakes, yes.
Yeah, and there's dolmens out there, and cairns, and there's inscriptions going out to way out to the Milk River in Alberta, Canada, So, yes, there are people that are working on this, and I think these TV shows, the Internet, and then there's been a lot of books and publications written. But the public wasn't aware of a lot of this, I mean, our educational system really doesn't teach a lot of history, and it certainly doesn't teach a lot about what we're talking about tonight, for sure, which is really a shame.
Thank you so much for the call, Steve.
Great, nice question.
Well, thank you for answering it. What I was going to say was that, growing up here I live in Tazewell County, which is just a few counties away from Wyoming County. Growing up, there was never any speak or mention of those sites growing up. Not until, later in life when I started, getting into that kind of stuff did I find out about it. But, you just don't hear about it. Here being that close.
That's a very good point. I mean, a lot of people still don't know about our site, even with the TV shows. But you're right. Yeah, our educational system and just the people talking to people on the street or whatever, they don't even know about these things. And I mean, you have mounds like Moundsville in West Virginia. That place is incredible, And I think that site they found a stone that has, I believe, Phoenician alphabet, but I think it's Hebrew writing. I think it's like a Decalogue, the Ten Commandments.
Right. Yes.
Ohio.
Yep.
These are upas, out-of-place archaeological artifacts, and they're found all over the landscape. There's just too many of them to be hoaxes, I think. And some of them were found by the earliest settlers. But you're right, people just don't know about this stuff. They still don't. But it's getting better, I think. I think it is getting better. And people like yourself, you spread the word and get people interested in preserving these and researching them and making them aware that they even exist. There's carvings out there. There's structures. It's just in mounds and everything.
Thank you so much, Steve. We'll see you tomorrow night on Fader Night.
Thank you, Steve.
Jimmy, as always, brother. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Steve. Hey, Bear, how are you tonight, sir?
Hey. How you doing?
Hey, Bear, it's always great to hear your voice, my brother. And just let me say, last night...
I got something for you you might be missing.
What's that?
A quartz crystal above the structure and the 0.01 resonance of the Earth compressing the quartz, and that can generate a lot of energy. In fact, if you look at a lot of paranormal sites, that's what you'll find is a lot of quartz and water.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. Hey, Bear, you going to take the answer off the line, or are you going to stay with us?
I'm going to take the answer off the line, my friend, and be safe, be well.
Be well, Bear. You're the man. You know that. I think I just cut him off. Sorry about that, Bear. He brings up a great point, Dennis, and I tried to get to this earlier. Quartz, it seems to be tied in with all of the megalithic sites. It seems like it's always there, and you have it there. It has to be significant. There has to be some type of energy there.
We do have the quartz, and we do have the quartz crystals, and Bear mentioned that. I think the piezoelectric effect, they call it.
Yep.
You bend it, energy comes out, put energy into it,
yep.
And they use it in computers, quartz, and it's
Speakers,
amazing. They're trying to use
sure.
quartz to store information, too, and they're working on that right now, and some people, like Ancient Aliens, think that they've already done that, We actually had the crystal skull here, and I know there's some controversy whether it's a hoax or, it's one that is Anna Mitchell Hedges, and has been, some people believe it's fake and some people believe it's real. I don't know, but that was made out of quartz too. Whether it's real or not. We had it here. It was pretty cool. I don't know the verdict on that thing, but it was a pretty cool thing. But you're right. Yeah, a lot of these sites, like the cairns, they'll find quartz on top of the cairns.
Mm-hmm.
These big pieces of quartz.
Mm-hmm.
Almost many of them. It doesn't seem just to be a few, but my dad noticed that when he did his research. And he found that quite often. He often remarked about that. White quartz or quartz crystal or whatever. Found on these in the chambers too. Found inside the structures too.
It's an interesting part of America's Stonehenge to me is the quartz connection.
Yep.
Hey Dino, how are you tonight, sir?
Hi. Okay. A little chilly and wet, but I had a fire going. So, how are you tonight, Dennis?
Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you very much.
I just want to say I don't have a whole lot to add except that you're very blessed to have lived 3 generations on that land. And, I took anthropology in college and it was taught by boring, old professors usually or guys that were very conservative. And I just didn't think it was as interesting a subject. And I didn't even know about your site. And I just have to say there are a lot of connections in all the secrets that we try to uncover, especially on the Fade to Black program. It's just amazing. I don't know. I'd have to study the site more, but that table could be for sacrifice, it sounds like, but it could also be places built in high spots in America. I live on a high spot, and the Native Americans, that table could have been for dressing game, but I don't know, and you're going to live there for for generations. You might as well put a nice butcher table there.
Yeah, it looks like that. A fish cleaning table. I see those similarities, but it just doesn't look like that to me. It looks like a coroner's table. That's what it looks like. That's exactly
like down in Mexico, what they were doing up on top of those ziggurats.
Yeah. A lot. Like, can you imagine? Let me throw this out there to you, Dino. Could you imagine growing up like Dennis on top of? It's like growing up with the Sphinx on your property.
Oh, wonderful experience. I wish I would have had a family that stayed together, let alone 3 generations, and to live on your own land and to have a bit of ancient history. And what a wonderful thing.
Yeah, totally. Because, when you're running around 5, 6, 7 years old with your brothers and exploring, you always imagine finding a cave or finding something cool or finding, that's in your imagination. And you go out and run around the woods and discover whatever. But to actually have it for real on your property, I could not imagine. What a glorious childhood. That's just amazing to me.
Well, thank you so much,
that's
Dino.
all I can add. I'm going to study more on your site, and the more I learn about these ancient sites all over America, Dennis, this is, we need to study this more, and it sounds like the establishment doesn't want us to,
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Hey, Dino, thank you so much.
I just wondered, Steve, be honest, we're about the same age. Did you drop acid up there in the 70s?
Hey, you know what, Dino? Thank you for the call. You know what? That is a great question. In the 70s and 60s, did the hippies go up there and hang out?
Yeah, they still do. We still have it occasionally. Yep, they come up here and they you can tell, they're getting stoned up on the stones here. I thought it'd be a great place for a rock concert too. But yeah, we get them. Yeah, we get people up there, and I don't know if they go on trips and and see visions of what the place used to look like. I would love to go have a time machine myself and go back in time and see what this place looked like. I don't know if that's one way to do it,
Right.
But we still we get people up here like from all walks of life, and but we're not like Colorado where it's legal yet for the other thing. But
you're a commercial pilot, so you would never disclose.
You can't mess around with that.
But you did once. Come on.
Maybe before I became one, but I can't acknowledge that. I can't say yes or no to that question. But we have people up here all the time, and they enjoy themselves. But you can tell they go up there and they do that, and they have their enjoyment up there. But those are great. I appreciate what Dino said. That was very, very kind remarks, and it certainly makes me appreciate. Sometimes you forget about kind of how neat it is to have this place because you're there all the time.
Yeah.
But those are very kind remarks. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and the other thing is you are against the establishment. You're against the orthodoxy and academia that's out there. You're against that all the time. And I say it on the show to guests like yourself, you're rolling that rock uphill. And in your case, literally, all the time. And you're constantly fighting it, and you're fighting the good fight. And we all appreciate that. Now, before I let you go, you're a commercial pilot.
Yep.
So I have to ask you a couple of questions. Only because I've only had a few commercial pilots on the show, and I need to take advantage of this. MH370, how did that plane disappear? And is it possible? What are you certified on now? What do you fly?
Well, right now I'm flying for American, but I'm flying the smaller jets right now. I have flown Boeing 727s, and then I've flown Saab 340s and Dorniers and Navajos and Twin Otters over the last 40 years. But right now I'm on the Embraer jets right now. We're in the smaller division, based in Kennedy and LaGuardia. But yeah, that's a mystery. That we don't know what happened. I mean, we've talked. I've had other people that have, when we go down for training and stuff, talk about that in Dallas, where we have our headquarters. And people have different theories and different ideas, but nobody has the facts of what happened to that. It will certainly be interesting in the future when they do if they can find the black box, find any of that. That will be interesting.
Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it possible today to remotely fly an aircraft?
Oh, I think the technology's there. I mean, drones are basically just little smaller airplanes. I talk to a lot of my co-pilots, and I say, someday you're going to be replaced with a robot, and they can do that now. But it's expensive, and the technology's still evolving. I say someday it will happen, but one of the comments is the public's acceptance of that. So I think it probably will be the freight, like a UPS or FedEx kind of thing, and the military for sure. Military's already doing that. And eventually down the road, I don't know if it's 50 years from now or 30 or, 100 years from now, there'll be, these planes will be flying themselves. And there'll be a transitional period where they'll still have pilots on board, as a backup. I just think that will happen. Pilots don't want to hear that. I'll be retired shortly, so I don't have to worry about that. But if I was a young guy in my 20s, I might be a little bit worried about that, being replaced before I retire, But there are drones. The drones are, actually, Scott's the film company, one of the guys makes drones for that, and it's pretty cool. He was talking about that my son and I were. My son's an engineer. This guy's an engineer, and he's a cameraman for Scott. And he was talking about his drones, and they use them for TV ads and everything. He was talking about how it works, and it is pretty amazing what it can do. It can fly itself. It's autonomous. It'll do its own thing. You know.
Well, I have Microsoft Flight Simulator, and
my son does too.
Yeah, and I've got my joysticks, and I enjoy that. But even with my knowledge with that, you can fly just about any plane with that program. Could I go in and take over the cabin and fly your aircraft, a small jet?
It's going to be a little overwhelming if you do. I mean, and it's possible, and they probably can talk you down if both crew members up front died, because they wouldn't want to open up the cockpit door. That's like a no-no now. So
right.
But and it's locked, so if we both died at the same time, you can get into the plane. But somebody can get. There's just really those doors are pretty they're toughened now since 9/11. But it would be a little. Even if I stepped into a different aircraft, I'm not checked out on it. Initially, it'd be a little bit overwhelming. Even though I got about 30,000 hours of flying right now, it's like where is everything? You get yourself in there. So you'd recognize some of the things, but it would be a little bit. You might be able to do it. You might be able to get the plane on the ground. Definitely, air traffic control would talk you down. And then that has happened before. They've had that on TV where people have been talked down. But it can be a little bit overwhelming, I'm sure, step in there and say, okay, now I'm going to fly this thing and land it.
Right. And the other question that I have for you is with Malaysian Air, and I know this is completely off subject, but you're a professional commercial pilot.
Yep.
With Malaysian Air to have two planes go down, I don't know how many planes are in their fleet, but to have two of them go down, it can't be a large fleet. It can't. And two Airbuses too at that. What do you think the odds of that happening are? You fly for American.
Yeah.
It would be like two American planes going down or two United craft going down. I mean, so close together under a strange circumstance. What are the odds of that? Because plane crashes just don't happen that often.
Yeah, it's still the safest form of transportation.
It is completely.
Yeah, unfortunately, 9/11, we had had the two American planes go down, and actually Scott's company did the research on the Pentagon. All the structural analysis from an American hit the Pentagon. But that year we had three American planes go down. There was one that took off out of Kennedy, and it had a structural failure in the rudder. And actually the co-pilot worked for I knew him at a previous company. Well, he worked for a previous company with me too. But he was a co-pilot flying that leg, and unfortunately they blame it on him. And I don't know. They say it was a rudder control input, and it caused stress, and that plane went down. And that was right after 9/11. I don't think everybody remembers that, but it was right. It hit, I think it was Rockaway, New York.
Oh, that's right.
Airbus, yeah. And so they had three that year that they lost. United lost two aircraft, So, but yeah, the Malaysian thing is really what a tough thing for that company. It really is. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. I had a great time, and we've got to get you back on and with your son Kelsey. I've got some questions
great.
for him. So
I will talk to him.
Happy flying. Be safe out there, and keep rolling that rock uphill.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you, and your guests had great questions, and I really, really enjoyed that, and I hope to be back in the not too near future, hopefully.
Thank you.
It's almost 1 o'clock out here, so I'm trying to stay awake.
Yeah, exactly.
Total pleasure, yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Behave. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Take care now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Dennis Stone, everybody. America's Stonehenge. Thank you so much. What a great show. Another great show here on Fade to Black. What can you say? Thank you so much. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Thank you. Stay tuned. Coming up next is After Hours AM. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's executive producers, Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. Thanks to LJ3, Renee, and Jonas. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale, graphics by Method, music by this guy right here, Doug Aldrich. Ooh, I played the wrong outro music. Going to get cut off by Keith. Music by Doug Aldrich, intro by Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, everybody, right here, right now, Fader Night, our favorite night of the week. Everybody behave, be well, be safe. See ya.